This story began with the fact that in a distant otherworldly world, an unreal sun was shining brightly among fairy tale mountains and there was lightning everywhere. Avu sat on the edge of a large cliff opposite some strangers against the backdrop of raging lightning. A large, predatory eagle was flying. The evil stranger prepared to kick the boy and throw him into the abyss. They maliciously wished him to be more careful in his next life and not get involved with anyone or anything non-human. The guy only managed to glance to the side before receiving a powerful blow. He fell rapidly into a deep abyss and flew past the eagle. After the fall, the protagonist didn't die suddenly. The entire space around him began to glow brightly, and a blue portal appeared. Against the backdrop of the mountain monastery, lightning flashed brightly. At that moment, there was a loud knock on the gate. The enlightened master sat silently and motionless on his big one, and he attained enlightenment. A whole group of cultivators came to the hall to congratulate the master on his achievement. They all bowed humbly to him. Near the Tower of Seals on the top of the mountain, a bright explosion appeared, and from there, huge chains appeared from the sky. From somewhere, a huge predatory monster with burning eyes and horns appeared and growled angrily. In the city of Brasov, there was a dark Gothic castle on a mountain with a red glow. The surrounding area was deserted, and only bats were flying around. Master Gulat very clearly felt that after 1,000 years, someone had broken through again among the inhabitants of the East. The master sat on his demonic chair and demanded that all of their nobles be gathered immediately. All matters with the werewolves needed to be settled as quickly as possible. The territory needed to be protected and a long-standing tragedy prevented. At this time, in the Western Catholic monastery, a minister was praying with a book and a cross. A large predatory eagle flew up to the cliff, and at that moment an explosion was heard. Rocks flew in all directions. Avu laughed cheerfully. He felt freedom and soared high in the sky. The protagonist, flying through the sky, was very pleased with his success. He had finally built the foundation. The protagonist's delight at the flight was interrupted by a very menacing cry from Earth. Someone was calling him from the mountaintop. The boy realized that there was no time to waste. He flew in very quickly and landed opposite his master near the monastery building. The master in white robes near the cave warned the student that this time his seclusion to build the foundation could take 2,000 years. After 2,000 years, the end of the magical era and the weakening of the world's energy could have already come. Avu would hardly have been able to survive in such chaos. Only now, the main character thought deeply and fully realized that 2,000 years had already passed. In this place, the spiritual energy for the main character was much weaker than before his solitude, although he was alone for only 2 days. But outside, 2,000 years had already passed. The protagonist decided not to waste any time. He flew up and decided to check everything exactly to be sure. At this time, 2 strangers were standing on the edge of the cliff. They were surprised when they saw a flying guy. Iwu decided that they came here to cause trouble on the territory of his sect. The fighter decided not to waste time and began shooting at the flying man, who was unfamiliar to him, with a pistol. To finish off the main character, the second bandit opened fire on him with a combat crossbow. Ivu was able to easily stop a bullet flying toward him with a simple wave of his hand. The weapon used against him was not from his era. Now it was clear that 2,000 years had passed. To get rid of annoying strangers, the main character struck them with a powerful lightning bolt from his hands. The sudden death of 2 fighters on the edge of the abyss surprised the protagonist. Humans, 2,000 years later, turned out to be very weak for him. A battered man lay unconscious on the ground. The protagonist assumed he had died from a simple scratch. At that moment, a phone started ringing near the body. Yewu picked up an unfamiliar device and was frightened when the girl Zhang Xiaoru angrily promised him from the phone that she would never marry him. The visitor from the past studied the telephone in his hands with great interest and pressed the keys. He was amazed by the device's ability to transmit sound over 1,000 kilometers without spiritual energy. The protagonist decided to take on the form of an unknown guy lying on Earth. This could help him against numerous dangers. Avu buried the stranger's body and, with the help of his magic, completely assumed his appearance. Avu, in a new young guise, decided to take revenge on the enemies of the deceased man whose body he took. The girl sat inside a building in Haizhou City and categorically did not want to marry the old man's grandson, even as a thank you for saving her parents. Jiang Xiaoru had a meeting with a friend. They sat at a glass table and talked to each other. Ling Qianqian, drink in hand, decided to calm her friend down. While Jiang was in Haizhou, her parents had no influence over her. Jiang's engagement was arranged in honor of her grandfather, who had been gravely ill for the past year. It was then that Master Yu said it all happened because of karma. The girl didn't want to marry the main character, even despite family pressure. She decided that if she brought Dr. Zhu's miracle cure to her grandfather, her relatives would leave her alone. She absolutely didn't want to marry a country bumpkin. While flying on a great sword over the city, the protagonist decided to integrate into this world to better understand it through a new identity. He decided to join a cult to learn more. The unexpected flight of a large airliner greatly frightened the protagonist. He was even thrown slightly to the side. A passenger on a plane was very surprised when she saw a man flying outside the window. The mother in the next seat decided that her daughter had simply played too much fantasy. For the flying Avu, it was very unclear why the flying plane did not emit any spiritual energy. The guy was so lost in his dreams and carried away by his flight that he didn't notice how he flew at full speed into the window of a large building. Inside, in an office, a guy was sitting with his secretary. The sudden arrival of a man through the window unpleasantly surprised the people in the office. They were confused as to who could be making such a noise. After hitting the window, the main character couldn't take it anymore and started flying down the building from a great height. The guy, after a high fall, landed successfully on his back on the ground on a green lawn. To him, it all seemed high. Even an hour later, the protagonist lay quietly on the lawn and did not want to get up. He looked up intently and dreamily. The main character was very frightened by the appearance of a huge predator next to his head. A little girl, holding a mask in her hands, was kneeling on a bench. Amused by the fact that someone was scared of her toy mask, she decided that the stranger was lying on the ground because he had no money. The child noticed that the boy had been lying on the ground for a very long time. She had learned from her mother that when people are hungry, they don't move. The protagonist decided it was time for him to leave and jump to his feet. He thanked the girl as he said goodbye and sensed that she had no spiritual energy. This meant she was an ordinary person. The long-distance flight took a lot of the boy's strength. He changed his mind about leaving and sat on a bench next to the girl. Until he reached the stage of the soul's inception, he needed to keep his head down. The little stranger noticed that her friend had nothing to eat. The protagonist was surprised when the girl handed him a bag of chips. She decided to help him regain his strength through nutrition. The protagonist, smiling, decided to try the treat from his little friend. He invited her to eat together on a bench. After this, the guy tried new food for the first time. The clothes of the girls around him looked very strange and incomprehensible to him. The child devoured a whole bag of chips with gusto. Evu came to the conclusion that, although life is hard, people haven't changed. The sharp scream of her mother frightened the girl Yin Yin. She turned to the side and called out to her mother in response. A frightened mother in a white dress, accompanied by security guards, ran up to her daughter. She was worried that her child was missing. The main character was very scared when the girl suddenly jumped off the bench to run up to the woman. The security guard, wearing glasses, reacted in time. He repelled the protagonist's attempts to grab the girl. The bodyguard, with a very quick and powerful movement, extended his hand forward and grabbed the main character's hand. The guard grabbed the main character by the head with a very sharp and powerful blow and twisted his arm very hard back. Evu was completely calm. He didn't like that the man attacked him so unexpectedly. It wasn't fair. The bodyguard jumped back with a masterful movement. He was ready to fight the guy again. At that moment, the woman stopped the guard. The boss was very unhappy that the fighter, old Hugh, started fighting so quickly. The girl was very surprised and clapped her hands when she saw that the main character turned out to be so strong. The woman looked at the guy on the bench with disbelief. Yin told her mother that she shared food with the main character after meeting him there. The hostess sternly demanded that the Hugh fighter come over and immediately apologize to the main character. The bodyguard bowed politely to the protagonist on the bench. He attacked him because he was afraid that Avu wanted to kidnap their girl. The woman handed the protagonist a small package as a thank you. At this time, Yin was already happily playing with the guards. The main character hugged the girl and, with a smile, asked her to remember to eat well. The guy immediately realized that his new little acquaintance was seriously ill. She had a special mark on her hand. Wu decided to help the little girl. He reached into his pocket to get some medicine for her. The boy put a magic pill in the girl's palm and said that it was medicine for her. She should take it when she felt bad. The mother was already waiting for her daughter near the car. Yin stood on the sidewalk and waved goodbye to the protagonist. The driver reminded his owner that they needed to go to Dr. Su now. He also saw a pill in the baby's hand. The woman with her daughter in the back seat told the security guard that they were free to go. Yin Yin asked the woman to keep the pill for herself, play with it for a little while, and then throw it away. The mother looked at her daughter tenderly and agreed. She decided that the miracle doctor would help cure the child. The girl was examining the ball in her hands and then suddenly fell into a chair. She felt ill. The woman in the back seat frightenedly demanded that the driver take them to Dr. Su quickly. Her daughter was unconscious. Yin Yin lay there, unable to move. She remembered the magical medicine from the main character, which she should take if she felt ill. The car with its passengers quickly rushed to Dr. Su's house. At that time, he was examining the books. A woman next to a security guard was carrying her little daughter in her arms. She fearfully asked the doctor to save her child. Zhu carefully picked up the little patient and decided to place her on the couch. He calmed the mother and decided to examine the girl. The old man put his hand to listen to the girl's pulse. There was complete silence all around. Shu quickly examined the little patient and sighed sadly. He could no longer help the woman. The woman was very scared and started crying. She immediately remembered her daughter when she was healthy. The woman fell to her knees in front of the doctor. She no longer had the strength to stand. She only wanted to save her daughter. The mother was even willing to sacrifice her life to save her daughter. Shui could only alleviate the young patient's suffering. Only a special 9-turn pill from 2,000 years ago could save little Yin Yin, but its recipe had long been lost. The girl lay unconscious, but the pill in her hands emanated a distinctive aroma. The doctor immediately noticed it. The old man looked with surprise at the ancient pill he found in the girl's hands. It looked exactly like the one in the ancient recipe. The woman told the old man that she had received this pill from the protagonist. The medicine could help the girl's health. The medicine in the hands of a little girl could well have been the 9-turn pill she needed. The mother's hope was restored. She realized that her little daughter could be saved. The old man was very happy. He realized that he could now save his little patient with the help of a pill. Yin Yin lay motionless on the bed while the old man administered the medicine. Sui decided he absolutely had to meet the main character who had given her the medicine. He assumed the man was a divine being. Yu informed the delighted mother that her daughter could recover after a little rest. The woman was very grateful. The old man began to ask the woman to come quickly to the protagonist. He wanted to hear the boy's teaching. The mother realized that she had almost thrown away the pill that could have healed her daughter. The security guard reminded the woman that they had met the guy at Haizhou University and that he could well have been a student. The woman urged her guard on. They could come to Haizhou University and find the right guy. She decided to repay the protagonist with gratitude from the Wang family. The old man stood to the side and listened to the woman's conversation with the security guard. He became lost in thought and decided that the guy might be generous to him. The guard ran away, and the woman realized that the guy who gave her the magic pill couldn't be ordinary. She decided to strengthen her relationship with him from the Wang family. The main character was walking through the streets of a huge city, grabbing a bite to eat on the go. At that moment, his phone rang. The guy decided to answer the call and put his bag on the ground. The phone had been silent since the last call. The phone in the guy's hand continued to ring. He turned on the line, and the stranger announced that people had been sent for him and asked if he had arrived in Haizhou yet. The protagonist had already begun to recognize the voice of his interlocutor. The stranger invited him to dine with Auntie Zhou. Some hidden thoughts and memories flooded the protagonist's mind. He looked thoughtfully ahead. He remembered how he once stood there as a little boy and cried. His aunt consoled him and wanted to treat him to something tasty. The guy confirmed to his interlocutor on the phone that he would definitely arrive on time and that she shouldn't worry. The protagonist first met a guy who was being stalked by his name. Now he heard a woman's voice, like his teacher's wife's. He decided it could be a coincidence or even something more. The protagonist's teacher left some things for him before leaving. They were kept in the possession of Wang Baolu. 2 girls were having fun on the lawn near Zhang Yunwu's mountain villa. One of them was unhappy because Auntie Zhou invited Ye Wu to her place. Both girlfriends were riding small camels. The girl, smiling, reminded her companion about Zheng Xun's boyfriend. Jiang got very angry and started scolding her friend after she compared the main character to Zheng Xun for her. At this time, the main character arrived and began to inquire about Auntie Zhou. Jiang, judging by his voice, decided it was a handsome guy. Ye Wu looked carefully through the gate at the mansion. He decided that this was the mountain villa, where Auntie Zhou was waiting for him. The girls watched the guest closely near the gate. Jiang didn't like the guest's clothes. Her friend was afraid the guy might do something to them. A friend suggested that Xiao call the Lion King to help him scare the guest. The friend immediately agreed. With a swift movement of her hand, Jiang sicked the enormous predator on the protagonist. The lion pounced on its prey. The main character didn't react at all when he saw the huge predator rushing towards him. He was completely calm. Yiwu calmly watched the lion flying towards him. One of the girls became frightened and began to doubt that the predator would simply scare the guy. The predator didn't harm the boy in any way. The protagonist sat down near the gate and petted the dog. He expected to encounter mountain gods and demons here. A woman approached from the side and called out to the protagonist. The boy turned around and thought he saw the teacher's wife in front of him. The protagonist looked nervously at the woman next to him. She still looked like his teacher's wife. The hostess was surprised by such treatment. The woman looked at the boy with interest and said that he could call her Auntie Zhou, just like he did when he was a child. The daughter threw herself into her mother's arms. The protagonist noted with surprise that the woman looked like his teacher's wife. Jiang looked at the boy with displeasure and told her mother that he had invaded and scared the Lion King. The woman was very upset that the girl was behaving so rudely. She reminded her that as a child, her daughter used to constantly follow a guy around and call him Wu Ji. The girl was very surprised when she realized that her friend Avu was standing in front of her now. When Jiang was very little, she always said that she wanted to marry Wu when she grew up. The hostess delicately stepped aside and let her daughter show the guest around the house. Jiang still felt shy around the boy. The main character greeted his new acquaintance with a smile, but she turned away from him. A young girl ran through the gates to the mansion. The protagonist became increasingly convinced that the woman looked more and more like his teacher's wife. The guy decided to himself that he would treat his new familiar family the same way he treated his own family 2,000 years ago. Suddenly, the guy was overcome by some very strange, dangerous feeling. He looked up above himself. A yin blood bone demon began to form above the mansion. Someone had taken the protagonist's teacher's power and wanted to destroy their entire family. The protagonist sensed a demonic presence within the mansion. If it had been the same group as 2,000 years ago, they wouldn't have been a problem for him. Jang stood in front of the surprised protagonist, and he still couldn't believe his eyes and looked around with admiration. The girl decided to tell the protagonist everything in detail. It turned out that this place was the largest abandoned building in Haizhou. 18 years ago, a special feng shui master altered the Earth's energy in this place. Thanks to economic development, this place has become the main residence of the wealthy. The protagonist was curious about the power of the feng shui master. This master was very popular in the world of inner metaphysics. The delighted girl remembered that her grandfather had become very ill and a feng shui master had saved him. The protagonist found the story he heard suspicious. He decided to keep the master in sight. While the main character and his girlfriend were examining the estate, a security guard in a suit ran up to them from behind. The bodyguard bowed and politely informed the young couple that their dinner was ready and the hostess was waiting for them. The protagonist hoped that things would improve after a while. Teacher Joe's wife was gentle, and he should be kinder to this family. After lunch, during hot and clear weather, two girls were relaxing in one of the rooms of the mansion. Jang lay on the bed, completely exhausted and without any movement, while her friend was nearby. The young housewife was unhappy that her mother allowed the main character to stay in the house. A friend advised the girl to stay at the university and not come home. She could join Professor Wang's research team, who had invited her earlier. Jang, sitting on her bed, decided that once school started, she would be away from home for 6 months. Then the servants from the mansion could go on vacation, and their unwanted guest would be left alone in the house. Maintaining the villa would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. The guy wouldn't have that much money. He could take menial jobs to save money so he wouldn't starve. The main character stood on the street and continued to communicate with the owner of the house near an expensive car. The protagonist gave the family's mistress a pill for Grandpa Yang. The woman thanked him and praised him in return. The auntie began helping the boy, and he now had a fully legitimate identity. He helped her into the car and decided to go to the Haizhou sect the next day. The car with the woman drove away. The protagonist was suddenly distracted and felt a murderous dimension somewhere nearby. At that moment, a group of mercenaries ran up to the building. They were planning to kill the guy. The protagonist immediately felt the spirit of the warrior killers close to him. After that, they suddenly charged forward. The bandits wasted no time and ran at full speed towards their target. One of them took out a knife to throw the target. The guy had to suddenly rush forward to avoid the knife flying at him from behind. The protagonist was attacked from all sides. The bandits jumped on him from above with weapons. They decided that they had to kill him for killing their people. Armed and dangerous bandits surrounded the protagonist deep in the forest after a long chase. The boss was very angry because the guy killed someone on his territory in Haizhou and decided to take revenge on him. The leader, in an angry voice, demanded that the boy kneel before him and kill himself. The bandits decided to kill the guy, but he suddenly disappeared. They couldn't figure out where he had gone. The leader became interested in the protagonist's disappearance. He managed to kill 2 of his best men earlier. The boss was interested in playing hide-and-seek with the guy. His subordinates split up and ran through the forest to look for the fugitive. The leader, with the help of a special artifact in his hand, could find the guy, even if he fled to the ends of the earth. The arrow on the search compass pointed straight at the surprised boss. He was already starting to get scared. It turned out that the main character had been hiding behind the leader the whole time. The leader only managed to see a small flower in his hand. The bandit didn't even have time to understand anything when the main character stunned him with all his might with a huge piece of wood. The boss woke up tied up. His accomplices lay tied up nearby. The frightened protagonist desperately wanted to know why the mercenaries were hunting him. The leader realized that the guy's skills were higher than those of the martial arts master, and he had to make a choice. In order not to say anything unnecessary, the leader bit into his mouth and swallowed the ampule of poison in order to commit suicide. The subordinates followed their boss's example and also bit into the ampules of poison in order to commit suicide. The guy Avu had to anger some very dangerous people so that they would send professional killers who were ready to commit suicide with poison after his head. The protagonist needed more training. He had to confront a very dangerous criminal mastermind. To cover his tracks, the protagonist cast a small blue incendiary flame onto the mercenaries' corpses. He needed to go to Haizhou University to truly understand the current era. He needed to become a disciple of this sect. The boss, while communicating with his subordinates in his dark office, was very displeased with the disappearance of a black group of mercenaries. His subordinates were carefully searching for the missing fighters using computers. After a little analysis, it was discovered that the signs of life of 5 members of the black group had disappeared. The captain in the suit at the table was very unhappy because all his subordinates were most likely dead. Drones reported that a group of Black Panther mercenaries had gone missing. Evidence of a struggle was found at the scene. The captain was very angry at such a loss. Bright red lightning flashed from his appearance. Due to the commander's overwhelming anger, bright energy waves flew out in all directions from him and threw his subordinates aside. The shock wave from the captain in the room was so powerful that even the front door was blown out. On the boss's orders, a group of suitable professional mercenaries was sent to deal with the guy. The main character was in a hurry to get to the right place as quickly as possible and jumped out of the bus onto the sidewalk as soon as it stopped. The guy found the use of mortal weapons in the current era very disturbing. He needed to keep himself a secret for a while to protect himself from trouble. The boy walked alone along the sidewalk among passers-by. He didn't need more enemies to survive. In the middle of the street, a man felt very ill, but other people didn't pay any attention to him. He realized that he couldn't pass by a person if he felt ill. He approached the man. Women passing by thought the man was faking his illness. They decided to warn him about it, but the protagonist decided to help him anyway. The stranger lay motionless on the ground. To the protagonist, everyone around him seemed cold and indifferent. The teacher raised the boy to always help if there is injustice in the mortal world. A small magic pill was supposed to help the lying stranger. The protagonist decided to fulfill his duty. Leaving the stranger's body near the wall, the protagonist walked away. He advised the girl to be more careful with those around her. The man remained sitting near the wall alone. He showed no signs of life. A passerby decided to help the man and asked how he was feeling, but he came to and felt better after the attack. The stranger clearly remembered that when he was on the verge of fainting, he received a pill from the guy, and when he woke up, he felt as if he had never been sick. The stranger, as soon as he got back on his feet, decided to find his benefactor and try to repay him. He asked a passerby for help, and the man agreed. A lot of students gathered at Haijo University during the day. Their classes were starting. The schoolgirl with books on the table and her friend were very happy that she was finally on campus and was able to escape from the guy she hated. Two girls were chatting happily with each other. They were interested because a new student had transferred to them. The teacher introduced their new student to the audience. The protagonist silently glanced at the students. The female students couldn't get over the fact that the main character was really in front of them. They kept thinking that the guy wouldn't be able to find this place. The teacher asked the boy to introduce himself. The schoolgirls froze, awaiting his answer. The protagonist decided that in this situation he shouldn't use his real name. He said his name was Ye Beichin. The schoolgirls studied the new student with interest. The teacher wanted to show the boy where he could sit now. Jiang became very interested when she realized that she and her new boyfriend had the same last name, but his first name, Beichin, sounded better. The student suddenly jumped up from her seat with her hand raised. She wanted the new guy to sit next to her. The teacher wanted to know the opinion of the student Xiaoru. The protagonist was still carefully examining the audience. The girl smiled slyly and said that she would also really like to sit next to the guy. The main character did not wait for the teacher's words and began walking to his seat next to the student. Avu decided to sit next to the girl with blue hair. He thanked her for agreeing. A group of students, along with Zhu Shan, were discussing among themselves that the student Jiang Xiaoru was very interested in the main character. After the end of the lesson, the bell rang and all the students went out into the corridor and began to disperse. A group of angry students in the hallway stopped the protagonist to talk to him about the girl. Zhou Shan sternly warned the protagonist to stay away from the girl Jiang. Yewu was determined that he should not cause trouble on the first day of school. The protagonist walked down the hallway. He slyly promised the surprised students that he wouldn't even approach the girl Jiang Xiaoru. Avu decided to punish the bully and quietly launched a small fire spell into his head. The students stepped aside. Shan didn't even notice that his head was starting to burn. His friends were simultaneously praising him. The frightened students began to extinguish the burning hair on Zhu Shan's head, and the main character calmly walked out into the street. For Yi Wu, more than half of his strength was enough. He didn't need to appear strong without cultivation. In order to understand the era he found himself in, the main character decided to read books, and after that, he went to the library. The female students were walking down the street and chatting with each other. One of them was unhappy because the main character sat next to Wu Ting. The girl didn't like the fact that the guy first rejected her and now approached her to talk. The guy didn't want to talk to or see Zhang and her friend again, so he calmly stopped. The main character had to duck because a bird flew by and pooped on his shoes. Zhang interpreted the guy's actions in her own way. She thought the protagonist had decided to bow to her, and she was very surprised. The student was already completely convinced that the protagonist had squatted in front of his girlfriend to confess his love to her. It was very romantic. Zhang felt a very strong tension in her body and began to run away. The protagonist, not understanding anything, looked after her. Yiwu didn't understand his new acquaintance's behavior. He didn't confess anything to her and didn't even have a flower. Zhou Shan's hair was badly burned, along with his clothes. His friends extinguished the fire with water, and he, enraged, decided to kill the main character. The angry students decided to pester the protagonist in the library. Sean, impatiently, had already begun sharpening his enormous cleaver to use against Yi-woo. While the main character was carefully studying books on cultivation, other students in the library laughed at him. Ye-woo saw some interesting inscriptions on the door. The letters seemed familiar to him, reminiscent of an ancient aura. They could contain cultivation methods for the Yuan Yin and Hua Shen levels. The protagonist headed to the ancient documents department. The students watched him go and continued to make fun of him. A man entered the library building. He was unhappy with the noise. The security guard immediately prepared to meet him. Professor Wang reminded the people in the library in a disgruntled voice to be quiet. A security guard greeted him nearby. Wang went into the library to find some ancient documents. At that time, the protagonist entered the archive through the door. The professor just now noticed that someone had entered the next room. The guard didn't notice the guest because he wasn't watching the door. Outsiders were not allowed into the archive of ancient documents, so the guard ran to boil the intruder. The main character was busy looking for documents in the archive when a security guard ran in and sternly demanded that the guy leave. Yi-woo did not obey the demand to leave. After that, the guard grabbed him by the shoulder to remove the forces from the room. The guard didn't believe the protagonist could read ancient texts. Even Professor Wang didn't fully understand them. The professor demanded that the boy carefully put the ancient documents back and not damage them. The guard wanted to kick the main character out right then and there, but the guy seemed familiar to Professor Wang. The man very clearly remembered that recently a guy saved him from death when he gave him a pill on the street. The guard was unpleasantly surprised when the professor demanded that he apologize to the boy. The protagonist also didn't expect Wang to be so kind to him. The worker realized with fright that he had just insulted someone very influential. He simply wanted to win Professor Wang's favor. A group of students were upset because the professor was unwilling to punish a rule breaker. They believed there should be no exceptions. For Wang, this was a good opportunity to find out if the protagonist could recognize the ancient texts. Ye-woo was still standing with the book in his hands, afraid that he had just violated the rules of the local sect. The man wanted to ask the guy for something, but the main character didn't want to be punished at that moment and lose face. The main character began to read the spells from the ancient book with concentration. The professor became increasingly surprised when he realized that the boy had restored the missing parts of the ancient scripture. The professor fell to his knees in front of Eva. The surrounding students realized that the guy had said everything correctly. The protagonist rushed to the man to help him stand up. Only now did he realize that Wang looked very familiar to him. Yi-woo immediately realized that he had saved the professor from death on the street earlier, but he didn't understand why the man had lost consciousness, even though his pill should have made mortals stronger. The main character decided that he had figured out the man's trick, and he pretended to deceive him and get the pills from him. Evie started running out of the office at full speed. The professor couldn't even stop him. Wang really wanted to know what book the main character took from the library. The security guard had to check it for him. The professor was surprised when he realized that the main character wanted to take a pinyin textbook for himself. He wanted to study it too. A group of students were waiting for the protagonist as he walked alone down the institute's corridor. Sean, weapon in hand, decided to rush into the attack. The protagonist quickly noticed the threat to his side. He realized that a second group was about to attack him. The guy was in a good mood. He decided to play with another group of armed hooligans. A few hours later, the protagonist approached Yunwoo's villa. He addressed his pursuers and suggested that they take a break. The bandits outside the gate were very surprised that they had been discovered. The protagonist stood calmly and didn't even think about running away. Shan, with a blade in his hand, urged him to angrily attack the main character as quickly as possible so as not to waste time. The bandits' plans were thwarted by some unknown ninja. He fell on them like a shadow from above. An unfamiliar masked fighter fell very quickly from behind onto the leader. Shan didn't even have time to think. The ninja proved to be a strong opponent, and he sent the Shan flying with a powerful kick, leaving him unable to even defend himself. A group of new mercenaries angrily demanded that the guy return something to them. Yi-woo sadly decided to himself that the persecution against him would never end. The main character could not understand what kind of thing they had just demanded from him, but the armed bandits did not retreat. The protagonist decided to deal with the pesky bandits. He dodged a sword attack and decided to fight back. The mercenaries couldn't hit the protagonist. He calmly jumped up and dodged their attacks. To prevent the main character from escaping, a whole group of bandits rushed after him. Suddenly, all the pursuers were frozen from behind by huge burning bolts of lightning. They realized they had been tricked and began begging the boy to let them go. The man behind Yunwoo's villa created a dangerous formation. He expected the protagonist's teacher's family to die here. The main character had been worried for a long time about how he could successfully break this whole thing. The guy decided to use his spell to send the bandits who attacked him to a good cause. The huge demonic skull, at the command of its master, flew forward very quickly to attack the bandits. After a successful showdown and explosion at the villa, the main character turned around and began to fly away. The explosion at the villa was so powerful and penetrating that it even struck the master in his physical body. He felt as if someone had broken his formation. The old man decided to figure out what happened at the villa and called his fighter to help him. Alan arrived very quickly, as instructed by his teacher. He needed to go to Haizhou and sort everything out as quickly as possible. The bandit examined the ruins of the villa. He realized that the protagonist had burned all their people to leave no trace. Now they needed to send a special team to kill him. The main character sneezed on the street. He decided to himself that someone handsome had just remembered him. A small, mustachioed guy walked thoughtfully and crashed into the main character at full speed. Avu. He was distracted from his thoughts and looked in surprise at the stranger who was lying on the ground next to him and rubbing his bruised head. The fat man jumped to his feet next to the boy and decided to make a quick getaway. He gave the protagonist a final, angry look. The passerby ran off to the side with unexpected agility. Avu looked after him with interest. When the stranger disappeared, the guy noticed with surprise that his wallet had just disappeared from his pocket. The thief opened the wallet and began to carefully examine its contents. It turned out to be empty. The boss was unhappy because Zhang Jiwen had just wasted his time because there was nothing in the wallet. The protagonist returned to the university's men's dormitory and knocked on the door to the room. A fat student opened the door to the protagonist's room. He looked very much like today's thief. The shy fat man fearfully asked the boy, how can he help him? The protagonist clearly understood that he was now looking at the thief of his wallet. Avu decided that he didn't need to spoil his relationship with his roommate. He pretended that he didn't know anything. The main character, as if nothing had happened, introduced himself to his new roommate with a smile. Zhang Jiwen greeted his new neighbor with a smile. He felt ashamed because he had robbed him before. The 21st century dorm room intrigued the guy. He looked around it carefully. Zhang invited his new neighbor to have dinner with him, and the protagonist decided to agree. Two students were sitting at a table in a cafe with a small snack. This would have been enough for them to get to know each other. The blue-haired waitress informed the customers that their meat was ready. It was Wu Ting, a girl already familiar to the protagonist. Wu Ting never expected to meet the protagonist in this place. He didn't understand what she was doing there so late. Wu Ting worked part-time at this establishment. Other customers were waiting for her at tables. The dissatisfied guests began calling the waitress over. They were already impatient to try their dishes. The girl had to justify herself. A particularly angry customer didn't want to accept the waitress's usual apology. He wanted compensation. The man at the table was angrily pestering the frightened girl and demanding that she go to his hotel. The dissatisfied client became completely angry and jumped to his feet because the girl did not look him in the face. The angry guest in the restaurant turned out to be Zhang Wu. He grabbed the girl by the arms and kept trying to drag her into the neighboring hotel, but she fearfully refused. The protagonist decided to protect his friend. Zhang Wu was very angry that someone wanted to interfere in his affairs. The other patrons jumped up with bottles in their hands. The friend wanted to calm the protagonist down and wanted to call the police. Avu wanted to stand up for his classmate and told his friends to step back and just watch. Zhang Wu was completely confident that he would deal with the student and told his fighters to deal with him quickly. The bandits expected a very quick massacre of the guy, and the whole group rushed at him with bottles in their hands. The fat man was afraid that his friend would get beat up, and he decided to quickly call the police for help. At the last moment, the bandit swung the bottle very wide to finish off the main character. Avu was completely and utterly calm. He watched attentively and with restraint as the bottle stopped near his head. The protagonist's blow was very precise and powerful. He expertly scattered the bandits to the sides. The surprised fat man still couldn't believe that the main character had defeated a whole crowd of dangerous bandits. The amazed Wu Ting only now realized that her classmate knew martial arts so well. Zhang Wu couldn't believe that his fighters could have just lost to some student. The protagonist was unpleasantly surprised by the weak abilities of his opponents. Another bandit angrily shouted at him that he wasn't easily intimidated. Zhang Wu pulled out a knife and decided to quickly kill the protagonist, but the guy calmly took the weapon from him with his own hands. The evil bandit had no choice but to admit his wrongdoing on his knees before the main character. An admiring Wu Ting and the fat man thanked the protagonist. The guy, smiling, told his friends not to be so polite. The main character agreed to walk his girlfriend home as she was afraid to go back alone. A student and his girlfriend were walking down an evening alley and chatting. She was telling him about her difficult life. Something suspicious made the main character stop and look around carefully. The guy explained to his frightened girlfriend that he was only slightly distracted. He was interested in the fleeting aura. As she said goodbye at her door, Wu Ting told her friend to go home and start resting. The mysterious, bright aura appeared in the alley again. Ye Wu looked closer and realized that he was seeing spiritual energy in front of him. The main character needed to stay in this place and investigate the spiritual energy. A small piece of paper fell from the door of the house. The protagonist realized that this was exactly what he needed. This time, the main character was met by bandits near the toilet doors. "Evu, I never expected a surprise attack." The bandits quietly approached the main character from behind and prepared to throw a blanket over his head. A group of attackers quickly pounced on the guy under the blanket and began to beat him with all their might. Screams and the sound of a fight could be heard near the school bathhouse. The students couldn't understand what was going on there. Yewu quickly dealt with the bandits. At first, they hoped to be forgiven and simply fell on their knees. The beaten Jang could not understand what the protagonist wanted from him in return. The beaten boss first offered his offender money as compensation. The main character angrily hit the bandit because he was unhappy with being considered a beggar. And after that, the leader offered a larger sum. The guy was not satisfied with the money offered, and after that he hit the bandit on the head with all his might. The frightened bandit was still covering himself with his hands. He didn't understand why 1,000 wasn't enough for the guy. Evu was willing to receive no less than 10,000 from the beaten leader. After the student got everything he wanted from the bandits, he decided to rent a house for himself. They bowed to him. In order to avoid embarrassment in front of people, Jang suggested that his accomplices not tell anyone about what happened today. The boss was completely unwilling to accept the loss. He suggested the fighters first treat the wounds and then decide how to deal with the guy. After the bell rang, students and teachers began to gather in the classroom for the start of the class. The teacher was telling the students the curriculum for the new lesson at the blackboard. The main character, while sitting at his desk, decided to rent an apartment from his girlfriend Wu Ting, who posted an ad. The student was very surprised when she realized that the guy really wanted to rent her house. Wu Ting hastened to assure his girlfriend that he had the money to pay her rent. A disgruntled teacher threw chalk at a boy because he talked during class and didn't respect her. Ye Wu seriously suggested that the teacher improve her health. He decided that the woman's yin and yang were out of balance. The woman didn't like the main character's words and she was unhappy with such a student in the audience. Wu Ting decided to calm the woman down and explain what he really meant when he spoke to her. The woman shouted at the guy to leave the classroom quickly. He decided to go and study on his own in the library. As they were saying goodbye before leaving, the guy reminded his girlfriend to save a room for him. When the student headed for the exit, the teacher felt relieved and decided to continue the lesson with the students. An unexpected call distracted the teacher at the blackboard. She was surprised to find Professor Wang calling. Wang demanded that Q direct the protagonist to him. He wanted to invite him to the project team. The woman promised to do everything. The teacher started looking for the main character in the audience. Wu Ting, who was sitting at his desk, raised his hand. The student explained to the teacher that she had just expelled the student she needed. Q was very scared and worried. She realized that she had to get the main character back as quickly as possible. The teacher ran to the door to find the guy, and she didn't want to cause trouble for Professor Wang. Evu. He was completely distracted from what was happening around him, and sat in the library with a book in his hands alone. Q ran through the corridors and tried to find the main character as quickly as possible. She headed to the library. The main character was surprised to see the teacher in the library during class. To the boy's surprise, the teacher politely apologized to him for the way she had just spoken to him. The teacher hurried to tell the boy that Professor Wang had invited him to participate in the Da Qin project. The main character was supposed to meet Professor Wang after he got acquainted with his project at the Historical Museum in the East. The protagonist was in no hurry to leave the library. Q quickly suggested that the guy leave and see what was going on there. Before leaving, E decided to finish reading the book. The woman told him that he could hurry. The bandits had their wounds treated in the hospital and were now conferring with their boss about what he was going to do next. Zhang decided to call the leader of this street for help in order to save the main character's lesson. The main character was calmly walking down the street and didn't even suspect that bandits had just noticed him in the hospital. Zhang was delighted at the opportunity to cripple the protagonist again. He decided to call his friend for help. Zhang asked his friend on the phone in a serious voice for help in dealing with one guy. Chong heard the name of the right person on the go and seriously promised his friend that he would do everything. There was little time and the bandit decided to hurry. He suddenly jerked forward on the scooter. The main character was looking for a history museum when suddenly a familiar leader called out to him from behind. Zhang was unhappy that the guy wanted to run away after he stole 100,000 from him. He considered it a mockery. The leader menacingly threatened the student that he would now be beaten, but he did not react to his words in any way. Fighter Chong was supposed to arrive soon to deal with the main character and avenge Zhang. The boss raced at full speed on his scooter to get to the scene as quickly as possible and deal with the guy. After greeting his friend, Chong immediately asked where he could find the right guy. The boss looked at the protagonist standing next to him with surprise and suspicion. He began to remember something. The frightened Chong couldn't understand what the main character was doing here. He realized that he needed to save himself. The bandit needed to avoid a fight with the main character at any cost. He decided that Li Chu was trying to kill him. The main character wasn't particularly surprised when he saw that they sent a Chong he already knew against him. Zhang impatiently demanded that the leader quickly deal with the main character. Chong decided to calm his friend down and hit him in the face with all his might. The offended Zhang did not expect that his friend would hit him instead of fighting against the protagonist. At this point, the boss bowed and begged the protagonist's forgiveness. He also demanded that his companion also kneel and apologize. Zhang began to gradually understand why Chong was so afraid of the protagonist. He decided that this guy was the secret boss. The main character intervened in the conversation and sternly demanded that the bandit do everything himself. The leader had no choice but to fall to his knees and admit he was wrong. The protagonist was very displeased that the bandit had threatened him again after the last time. The leader, on his knees, once again asked for forgiveness. The main character demanded compensation for moral damages from the surprised and frightened bandit. Evu decided not to be nice to the bandit anymore and hit him with all his might. After this, the leader agreed to pay another 100,000. To save himself, Sean handed the protagonist a card with money. For Ewu, this turned out to be very easy money. The leader had no more money left, and the protagonist turned away. The other bandits bowed politely after the guy. The stranger in the bushes noted with surprise that the main character had a few tricks, but nothing more. When a guy was walking down the street alone, something suddenly caught his attention and he stopped. Someone broke the trap the guy set in the mountain villa in the cloudy fog. The master's wife was in danger. Evu suddenly stood up from his seat and flew very quickly to the villa to see what was going on there. The attentive stranger informed his interlocutor on the phone that this guy had already left. The protagonist was hovering in the air above a mountain villa. There was a very dim, deadly aura there. It was urgent to find out who did it. The protagonist saw a crowd of people near the villa. All this seemed very interesting to the guy, and he decided to quickly descend to the ground. A group of bandits decided to immediately surround the main character after he landed. The attackers were waiting for the guest, and very quickly, the guy found himself surrounded on all sides. The sword-wielding stranger assumed the protagonist had destroyed the formation left by his teacher. This meant that Yewu didn't take his master seriously. The main character could not understand why the stranger was now accusing him of destroying the formation. Evu decided not to wait, and after that, the guy swung, and with all his might with a powerful blow knocked the attacker away from himself. The protagonist swung the blade he had grabbed and decided to drive away the bandits rather than fight them. Evu flew up. The bandit who attacked him was very weak and had no right to even look at him. The boss on the ground was very unhappy that his soldiers were standing around doing nothing. They were supposed to catch the main character. The mercenaries came to their senses and jumped up in unison to catch up with the protagonist. As he flew, he saw another group of fighters waiting for him. The mercenary with the compass commanded the soldiers to be ready to surround the protagonist. He needed to get the 2 books back. The protagonist gradually approached the ambush site. The mercenaries were to act on the leader's signal. EV wasn't scared at all. He decided to finally try playing against the bandits. The main character on the ground screamed in fear that some guys were chasing him and they needed to be stopped. The leaders of both groups glanced at each other in fear. They decided that the main character had outplayed many of their people. The bandits decided not to argue and very quickly rushed to attack each other. The boss jumped up sharply and flew above the ground. Below, his fighters fought against another group. The warrior, without thinking twice, swung his blade mid-flight to finish off his enemy on Earth. He wanted him to get out of his way. An ordinary magic compass turned out to be the only weapon for the bandit, and he wanted to use it to defend himself from an axe blow. The battle between the 2 factions on Earth continued. They considered each other enemies and did not want to retreat. It was a lot of fun watching the battle on Earth as the bandits destroyed themselves. The protagonist stood at a safe distance and watched as the bandits fought to the death for him. The leader with the compass repelled the enemy's attack, but felt very exhausted. The bandit was unable to defeat his opponent very quickly because this guy was very strong. The main character, flying over the clearing, jokingly asked the bandits if they had finished fighting and offered his help to the leaders. The 2 bandits on the ground became angry when they recognized the protagonist. They had met him before and wanted to kill him. Both leaders realized that their target was the main character and they had only attacked each other in vain. The bandit became even more angry when he realized that the main character and the other leader had just fooled him. Evu was very amused when he saw the angry leaders. They were very easy to fool. The disgruntled boss fully realized that the guy had set them against each other in order to get rid of them. The main character considered his rivals to be idiots because they only just realized it all. The bandit could no longer tolerate the boy's bullying and jumped on top of him to kill him. E didn't like the boss's arrogance. The bandit, although he swung, couldn't hit the guy with his blow. The main character hit the bandit with a strong kick of his leg and he flew to the side even faster. The force of the protagonist's blow hit one of the bosses. Evu didn't even strain himself. The leader came to his senses and immediately understood why the boy had been able to kill so many people. He really did have strength. The bandits weren't very dangerous opponents for the main character, and he told them that they could approach together. The axe-wielding leader decided to kill the protagonist alone. He then slammed the axe into the ground with all his might. For Evu, the blow to the ground with an axe from his opponent was a bit showy and not at all dangerous. The bandit decided to deliver another blow to the ground with all his might, in order to frighten the main character even more. The guy didn't take long to respond. He carefully and quickly snuck up behind him to whack the leader on the head. The blow from the finger was so powerful and strong that it pierced the boss's brain and he screamed. When the first boss fell dead to the ground from a small blow, the second bandit could not believe that this was possible. The boss was frightened when he realized that the main character was about to take him on. The guy seemed too crazy for him. The boss decided to avoid a fight with the guy and shouted at him goodbye, that he was giving him the opportunity to leave today. Evu decided not to take any risks and not let the bandit go, and pierced him through with a huge blade. The dead leader, who fell to the ground, was left with only one thing left: to train a little better in the next life. Evu flew into the sky. He left behind a pile of beaten and dead enemies on the lawn on Earth. The girl sat alone and waited for new members of the Chin project team at Haijo University. No one had joined the project team for many years. The teacher was curious about what the new member would look like. The teacher, holding a jug in her hand, was distracted when a student greeted her along with other students. Q was delighted to see the new students. They were supposed to come here today to meet the new member. Q explained to the curious and impatient girl that the new student had not yet arrived. While the students were chatting among themselves in the room, the main character came in and asked at the door whether he had chosen the right project team for the Chin project. Jung never expected to meet the protagonist here. She was surprised by his appearance. Q confirmed to the guy that he had come to the project team. She was glad to see him. The teacher was very interested in the new guy. She approached him and asked him about his name. Q liked the new student and would be even happier if he joined the team. While the protagonist was chatting cheerfully with the teacher near the door, another student was displeased that his girlfriend had become interested in the new student, but he decided to keep his distance for now. The angry and dissatisfied student couldn't take it anymore and decided to teach the new guy a lesson. Evu didn't see Professor Wang in the classroom. This teacher was at an important meeting today and couldn't come. An angry student in the audience decided to do something against the main character. He expected a show to happen soon. Ewu stopped abruptly and unexpectedly. He only now noticed how a precious pearl appeared in his pocket. After the student's scream, security immediately ran into the room. They were supposed to find some stolen artifact. The security guard was very unhappy that someone dared to steal at the university. He decided to find the perpetrator. The protagonist didn't even have time to turn around when the attacker accused him of theft in front of the guards. A stranger planted something on him to frame him. The teacher suspected the new student of theft. The guy was surprised and began to justify himself by saying he hadn't taken anything when Chu directly accused him of stealing. The student very accurately told the guards that the stolen pearl was lying on the main character's right. Evu knew that he was completely innocent and with a smile invited the guards to come and search him. The officer carefully examined the protagonist's clothes, but found nothing suspicious about him. The security guard reported that he had found nothing, and the frightened student could not believe it. The student was even more surprised and frightened when the protagonist reported that the stolen pearl of Suihu was in his possession. The student came to his senses after the surprise and shouted that he couldn't be accused of theft, since he was the senior member of the team. To prove his complete innocence, the guy suggested that the guards search him. The officer carefully searched the student's clothes. He looked calm, but he was nervous and couldn't understand why the pearl hadn't been found in the protagonist's clothes. The security guard suddenly felt the stolen pearl in the student's pocket and began to take it out. The amazed guy could not understand how the pearl could have ended up in his pocket. The teacher reprimanded the student for trying to frame someone. Shen-Chi still couldn't believe that all this could have happened. In a way that was incomprehensible to the student, the pearl from the protagonist's pocket ended up in his own pocket. Shen-Chi, with his low intelligence, decided to go against the protagonist and was unable to do anything. Ye Wu slipped the pearl into his pocket just in time. He fired the offending student. Their project team did not tolerate individuals with questionable character. When the guards dragged the guy away, he was still making excuses and asking to be given the opportunity to start over. The teacher realized that the main character had not stolen anything and therefore approached him in a friendly manner. He apologized to the guy for accusing him. Ye Wu was pleased that the truth finally came out. The protagonist agreed to have dinner with the teacher and students as an apology. Evu inside the establishment was drinking beer with great appetite after a toast with his new friends. The protagonist, sitting at the table, felt a strong sense of refreshment. After the beer, he felt better and better. During the meal at the table, the main character told the teacher that he brought them here because he had business with friends here. Evu asked the waitress at the table, when will she give him the opportunity to see her house? Wu-Ting didn't expect such words from the guy and turned to him with interest. She didn't know exactly what to answer him now. The astonished waitress agreed to the protagonist's proposal to show him the house this evening. Zhang, at the table, immediately noticed that the main character and the waitress seemed to be hiding something. The protagonist decided to leave the restaurant as quickly as possible, but his friends could stay for a bite to eat. Qi winked at him as she said goodbye. He hurried and pulled his girlfriend very impatiently by the hand so that they could go to her home as quickly as possible. Wu-Ting was surprised by the guy's persistence but still decided to go with him now. Zhang now clearly and unequivocally understood that there was something between the main character and his girlfriend. Nearby, the students were slyly discussing it. The protagonist, while visiting his girlfriend, liked the view from the window. The rent was 500 yuan daily. Wu-Ting was very surprised when the guy gave her a card with 10,000 yen. She couldn't believe he was giving her so much at once. The guy planned to live in this house for a long time, and his girlfriend promised to sort out the details later. The happy student prepared to leave the room. The protagonist could already go to bed. During cultivation, the guy realized that in this place the spiritual energy was strong and penetrated inside, but something distracted him. Without thinking twice, Wu-Ting jumped out the window because he heard some suspicious noise there. In the silence of the night, the Lion King barked at some mythical werewolf in the yard. The dog in the yard rushed bravely to stop the predatory and evil huge spirit animal. The protagonist understood everything at once and rushed forward. There was dense spiritual energy around him. Evu landed so hard that fire spread around him and the earth began to crack. The main character opened the monster's huge predatory mouth and looked closely into it. The demonic predator screamed angrily, and the man had to jump above it to protect himself. After the guy landed, the predatory beast flew far to the side into the wall and could no longer attack him. The bright sun began to illuminate the alley. The body of the demonic predator lay motionless near the wall opposite the boy. The monster suddenly came to his senses and glared at the boy. He prepared to pounce. The main character swung and prepared to finish off the helpless predator with a powerful blow. The blow was so powerful that the predatory monster exploded and flew into pieces. After the destruction of the monster, only a small cloud of energy remained in front of the main character, which he absorbed. The boy began to fly above the ground thanks to his huge wings. A bright light fell on him from above. The dog barked discontentedly. She really didn't like the way the guy flew up above the ground and started walking away. The animal's behavior aroused the protagonist's interest. The dog was perhaps dissatisfied with having killed its prey. The dog was determined to find something in the pile of trash and was barking excitedly. The guy was watching what the animal was about to do. A bright light streamed from the trash can. The animal had found a spiritual vein and the guy was very happy. Yewu looked into the book and felt a strong spiritual energy. He also saw a feng shui treasure land, and it was an excellent time to begin cultivation. Thanks to the artifact, the guy gained the ability to cultivate the technique of seeing 1,000 miles. The main character decided to test how well his new skills from the book would work and opened one eye. The spiritual energy was very intense and the equipment worked perfectly. As a result, the guy was able to see his girlfriend in the bathroom through the door. The main character had to ask forgiveness from Amitabha and the heaven-blessed Buddha. The silence of the street was broken by sirens and an ambulance pulled up to the building. Wu-Ting was helping her mother into the ambulance. She was scared. The protagonist watched from the side. The daughter could no longer get into the car with the doctors and could only call a taxi for herself to the hospital. The main character decided to approach and talk to his girlfriend after the ambulance drove away. Wu-Ting told her friend with great excitement that her mother had become ill and had been taken to the hospital. The worried protagonist decided to go with his girlfriend to her sick mother to help her. The doctors in the ward were unable to help the sick woman. The doctor could no longer do anything. The doctors decided there was nothing they could do to help the woman. At that moment, the protagonist ran into the room and stopped them. Wu-Ting was very worried about her mother's condition. She ran up to her to see her condition. The girl begged the doctor to save her mother, but the woman's illness was very rare. The protagonist was ready to cure the patient's rare condition. He had a way to do it. The dissatisfied doctor could not believe that the boy could have any medical skills. The doctors were very surprised when they realized that the boy was self-taught and had never studied anywhere. The doctor warned the boy that he might pay for his words. The doctor suggested that the protagonist leave, but Evu explained to him in response that he only wanted to try to treat the woman. The doctors were talking among themselves with discontent. They still couldn't agree to allow the guy to treat the patient. After a warning from the doctor, the protagonist agreed to take responsibility for the patient's health. The doctors didn't believe the guy so much that they were ready to eat their hats if he cured the woman. Wu-Ting was still very hesitant about whether to give the protagonist permission to heal her mother. The daughter had no choice but to agree to let the guy treat her mother. She had no other choice and had to resort to extreme measures. After the girl's consent, the doctor told the protagonist that he could begin treating the patient. The protagonist launched a magical bundle into the air. He wanted to show off his skills to those around him. Iwu decided to try healing the woman with magic needles. He inserted them into acupuncture points. After that, he needed to properly direct the spiritual energy and connect the meridians. The patient came to after being pricked with needles and developed a bloody cough. The daughter was very happy that her mother came to her senses. She grabbed her hand and wanted to know if she was okay. The patient lay unconscious on the couch. The doctor placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and threatened him with prison and murder, but Iwu did not agree with the accusation. The medic sternly demanded that the boy look at the woman himself. The daughter still wanted to bring her mother to her senses. The woman opened her eyes and began to come to her senses. Her daughter next to her was very happy. The patient felt better, but told her worried daughter that she still couldn't stop coughing. The joyful protagonist confirmed to the patient that she would fully recover within half an hour. The doctors on both sides looked at the guy in surprise and did not understand who he was. But the guy turned out to be just an ordinary student. The excited and surprised doctor quickly apologized to the boy. The doctors didn't immediately realize all of his skills. As he was leaving, the guy advised the doctors to be more careful next time. The daughter told her mother, who had come to her senses, that her classmate had saved her. The woman thanked the boy. Without thinking twice, the main character suggested going to the girl's home so that she could thank him. Iwu smiled slyly at the girl and wanted to explain to her in detail why he wanted to go to her house. The main character was consuming mountains of food with gusto at the girl's house. She looked at him in surprise at the table. After dinner, Wu Ting continued to sit silently and look at the guy. She did not touch the food. Wu Ting happily informed the girl that he was finally full and a mountain of empty dishes had grown on the table. The girl still couldn't believe that the main character just wanted a table with food as a reward. The guy, having eaten his fill, got up from the table and prepared to leave. He didn't need anything else. The guest no longer paid attention to the hostess. He was ready to go back to his room and rest. Wu Ting and the guy said goodbye at the same time and wished each other good night. The girl was very pleased with her friend's behavior. She even decided to marry a man like him. The guy was completely absorbed in the cultivation process. A bright ball appeared in his hands. He was distracted by the barking of a dog. The dog ran into the room and decided to tell the man something. The main character was distracted by the animal. Iwu listened attentively to the dog's barking. He wanted to understand what it was trying to tell him now. The boy concentrated and heard from the dog that someone had come to the estate to harm the owner. Iwu, full of confidence, decided to punish anyone who would want to plot against the teacher's wife. There was not a minute to lose. The boy, hugging his pet, flew through the air to get to the estate as quickly as possible. Several cranes and construction workers stood near the ruins of a large mansion. They continued to demolish the building. The mistress thanked the master for warning them in time. Uncle Song managed to get everyone out of the estate. The man replied that he would not allow himself to witness the Zhang family's suffering. The Yinfeng formation in the mansion was destroyed by fire. Years of hard work by the master were wasted. He had to resort to extraordinary means to rebuild everything. The mistress was willing to pay any price for the man. The owner was very surprised when she heard from the master that he would need heart blood, but he could extract it using technology without surgical intervention. The woman agreed to the master's terms. She was ready to endure this to save her father's life. The old man needed the woman's heart blood and he invited her inside the mansion to get it. The cultivator in the courtyard knew the woman wouldn't survive if her heart blood was taken. The apprentice told his friend not to waste time and to get the formation in order. The student was ready to establish the Yinfen information very quickly since he had mastered it well. To restore the formation, the student threw a piece of magic paper with spells in front of him. The formation began to restore, and a very bright explosion appeared above the ground. Lightning was flying everywhere. The student continued his magical ritual, and huge burning magical texts flew around him in the air. The formation's restoration process began to slow. A bright blue lightning bolt began to descend from somewhere in the sky, and a portal opened. The Taoist interrupted the ritual and decided that he was seeing strange celestial disturbances before him. The protagonist arrived at the scene. From the heights of the flight, he looked with interest at the warriors on Earth. The surprised Taoists on Earth could not understand who had flown to them on a sword, and it was clearly not a human. The flying dog howled loudly, and this frightened the people on Earth even more. They couldn't believe their eyes. Yewu realized that the dog was very worried because someone here had restored the external information of Yinfeng. The Taoists prepared to fight on the ground. They decided that they had just encountered a yokai and needed to protect the pharmacy from destruction. To protect themselves from the arriving guests, the Taoists activated black magic, and everything around became cloudy. Yewu swung his blade wide and prepared to attack with the magic of the renegades on Earth. The guy's spell was so powerful that he was able to destroy the dark spells above the Earth. The Taoists decided to flee as quickly as possible after the protagonist destroyed their dark magic. The main character decided to land on the ground at high speed from above, and after that a powerful explosion was heard all around. Both Taoists couldn't even stay on their feet. They were thrown aside by the shockwave. Magic didn't help them at all. The disciples established a yin-feng formation, and they could suddenly interrupt their life cycle after the protagonist's threats with a blade. The fighters gradually began to calm down when they realized that in front of them was an ordinary person, and not a monster. The Taoists had no choice but to kill the main character because he decided to prevent them from establishing the formation. The two disciples' cultivation levels were superficial. They wouldn't have been able to establish the yin-feng formation on their own. Someone else could have helped them. To quickly deal with the enemy, one of the fighters summoned a huge burning sword for himself. The Tong Yin array could help the fighters resist the main character, and they prepared to use it. To quickly use the defensive array, one of the fighters cast a magic spell. After the array was activated, a huge magic sign appeared on the ground below the fighters. The main character didn't seem to be at all worried, and didn't even move from his spot when his opponent started activating magic. The demon god had to help one of the cultivators to quickly finish off the main character, and he called him. The embodiment of the demonic form began, and the fighter immediately became demonically dangerous. It turned out that there were still people who were connected to the demon race. The demon man, full of strength, rushed forward to quickly finish off the main character right away. The demonic weapon was supposed to help the fighter finish off the main character, and he swung it to strike. The demonic attack was very quickly stopped by the cold breath from the main character. The main character's skills greatly impressed the Taoist. To him, all of this seemed impossible. The cultivator used his abilities for evil, and the protagonist ran to attack him as quickly as possible. Evu, without any mercy, he prepared to strangle the frightened warrior with his hand for starting to commit atrocities. Only the main character could do what was right, and he continued to strangle the warrior with all his strength. The Taoist didn't hold out for long, and the guy threw his immobilized body to the ground with a wave of his hand. The lifeless body of his younger brother frightened his older brother very much. The younger brother found the strength to rise above the ground and warn his colleague that their opponent was very strong and they needed to hurry. The Taoist advised his friend to run away and fell to the ground, dead and exhausted. The frightened fighter no longer wanted to fight with the main character and decided to quickly flee. To help cope with the evil spirit and avenge his dead brother, the warrior ran to find a teacher to help him. The main character wanted to see the cultivator's teacher and very quickly appeared in front of one of them. The fighter decided to try to save himself using shadow steps, but he failed. The protagonist desperately needed to meet with a Taoist teacher. This master could instruct them to establish a yin-feng formation. The beaten fighter could no longer resist and decided to tell the chief immortal everything he wanted. The frightened Taoist told the boy where his teacher was. It was this master who ordered them to set up the formation. From the very beginning, the teacher was on Longhu Mountain, but he was expelled from there due to violation of the rules, and he was forced to leave. A little later, the master founded his own sect and recruited many disciples. The master wanted to find the treasure that was hidden under the Yunwu estate and developed a special plan for this. The process of the treasure's appearance took place through the secret creation of a yin-fen formation that absorbed the energy of the people living there. After hearing the warrior's detailed story, the main character fully understood how everything had happened. The warrior asked the protagonist to spare him after he told him everything. The evil cultivator deserved to die, and the enraged Ye Wu finished off the Taoist with a magical technique. The magical skill of soul dispersal knocked the last of the life out of the cultivator's body. The main character needed to quickly find and protect his master's wife, as she was in danger. Ye Wu couldn't continue like this, as his cultivation would be exposed. He needed to hide it. The hostess in the chair in the hall was ready for the master to take her heart blood. An old man with an evil smile and a blade in his hands prepared to take heart blood from a frightened woman. Only now did the mistress realize that the teacher had deceived her and was preparing to cut her flesh. The master of weapons ran at full speed to attack the woman. It was already too late for her to save herself. The woman could no longer even call for help. She only closed her eyes and stretched out her hand in front of her. The protagonist appeared just in time and stopped the master's knife-wielding hand. The mistress's life was saved. The teacher did not expect at all that the main character would hit him so hard that he would be forced to fly to the side. The hostess was delighted and surprised by the unexpected rescue, and the main character angrily scolded the old man. The guy changed his appearance slightly with a mask. His teacher's wife certainly wouldn't recognize him. The angry and dissatisfied master prepared to activate a magic spell against the main character. The teacher decided that the boy deserved to die and, without thinking twice, attacked him with magic. The master decided to use a special roaring demon against his opponent to finish him off for sure. To protect the woman, the protagonist decided to punish the cultivator who had given in to evil and gone against the will of heaven. Evu put all his strength into a powerful attack, and with the help of a signal strike, he was able to repel the demon from himself. The main character decided to punish the master and finished off his demon with a very powerful blow. The teacher had been cultivating the evil spirit for 10 years. but the boy was able to kill it instantly. The old man had to come up with something again to protect himself. The protagonist was getting closer and closer to him. The master found the strength to cast another spell. He wasn't so easily frightened. Avu jumped up and with a very powerful blow of his hand tried to break through the old man's protective dome. The teacher decided to summon an evil spirit for protection in order to try to stop the boy. The evil spirit was the master's strongest trump card, and he hoped that the main character would not be able to stop him. Avu, in order to fully protect himself, began to call upon thousands of gods and saints. Thanks to the spell, the magic chains flew forward and stopped the flying spirits. The bound spirits were helpless. They could no longer attack the guy and screamed angrily. The master could not understand where the guy got such strong cultivation from, and who he was. Avu decided to call himself the old man's father before finishing him off with the magic chain in his hand. The protagonist's successes angered the master. He realized that he could no longer simply fight. The teacher decided not to take any further risks and jumped out the window to escape. Just then, a magic chain struck him from behind. Avu didn't try to catch up with the old man. He realized that he wouldn't be able to get far from him now. The master ran through the forest at full speed. This helped him quickly escape this time. A huge predatory dog appeared behind the old man. He wouldn't have been able to run far from such a dog. The dog was able to catch up with its prey very quickly and sank its claws into the master's back. The evil dog climbed on top of the man, and he lay silently and motionless on the ground. At the direction and with the approval of the protagonist, the predator was given the opportunity to deal with his victim. The dog was getting ready to bite the victim, and the old man only had time to look back in great fear. The pleased Lion King received praise from his master for being so smart, and now the dog had to follow the guy. Armed fighters were running through the forest. They were reinforcements from the teacher's wife. There was no longer any point for the main character to stay in this place, and he jumped up to disappear as quickly as possible. The guards still hoped to capture the old Taoist alive, and therefore ran towards him very quickly. The hostess looked closely at the body lying on the lawn. She realized that her teacher was already dead. The satisfied woman decided to thank the one who had just killed her master if she met him. The protagonist needed to replenish his spiritual energy reserves. He flew with the Lion King on a huge sword. The dog guarded its owner when he wanted to start cultivation. He promised to transfer spiritual energy to it as a reward. Some stranger appeared behind the main character and wanted to drive him away from this place. Avu. He never expected that in such a secluded and cozy place he would have to meet with some bandits. The main character did not understand who was standing in front of him and why these people forbade him to be in this place. The strangers turned out to be Mr. Huo's bodyguards. They were guarding their master's training session. Huo was perfecting his fighting skills and fist techniques. No one had the right to distract him now. For the main character, Huo's training seemed like just a regular warm-up. After insulting the elder, his fighters wanted to kill the main character very decisively. The master decided to get to know the main character better and therefore stopped his guards. Yewu didn't have to fight against the bodyguards thanks to Huo's intervention. He studied him carefully with his eyes. Huo knew everything perfectly well about the main character, and he didn't need any explanations from the guard. The elder didn't understand why the protagonist didn't like his fighting technique. The boy explained that his technique was missing a couple of moves and couldn't display its full power. Huo very strictly demanded that the guy prove the shortcomings of his fist technique. The main character wanted to get this place for cultivation for himself, and in exchange, he offered the old man to help him bring his fist technique to perfection. Huo agreed to the guy's conditions and promised that he would call him a teacher if he succeeded in perfecting his fist technique. The guy showed professional fighting moves only once for the elder. To show the full power of his blow, the protagonist had to choose a target for himself. There was a tree nearby, and Yiwu broke it into several pieces with a powerful blow from his hand. The elder and his guard were very impressed by the strength of the protagonist's blow. They realized he was truly a powerful warrior. Huo was very surprised because the protagonist's fist technique was several times stronger than his. The guards were very lucky that they didn't start a fight with the guy right away. They could have been beaten up, just like the tree. The admiring elder acknowledged the protagonist as a master. This performance was enough for the boy. The elder apologized to the boy for the offense. He asked the fighters to leave the place. Huo, in a very generous and noble gesture, gave this training area to the main character. Yewu angrily demanded that the old man take the people away quickly. He needed peace and quiet. The elder angrily confirmed to his subordinate fighters that they should leave this place as soon as possible. The Lion King barked happily when his master placed him in this place to guard. The elder really wanted to know details about the main character. He sent his subordinates to do this. During deep cultivation, the protagonist decided that even now, 2,000 years later, everything is connected to the past. Cultivation still existed, as there were people who proved it all. It was not entirely clear to the main character whether all this could have been an ordinary coincidence. Yiwu picked up the phone and got ready to make a call. He needed to find out as much information as possible. The main character wanted to ask the teacher Chu over the phone about a place at the university where he could get information about the times 2,000 years ago. Q invited the guy to her place that evening to find out more. She also told him about the excavation of the tomb, which is approximately 2,000 years old. The guy agreed to visit the teacher in the evening. He jumped up from his seat and headed towards the dog. The ancient tomb could have brought the main character the information he desperately needed. The students and their teacher stood near a large pit. It was the tomb that Q had told the boy about. For security, there were bodyguards stationed around the tomb, as an archaeological team had disappeared from the tomb earlier. The creepy place began to frighten the girls. Zhang was already beginning to regret that she had come here at all. The teacher suggested that her students go down into the tomb together so as not to waste time. There was complete silence inside the cave. When people walked through it, they only heard the sound of water drops. Zhang was very surprised that the tomb turned out to be even larger than her house. They walked forward in silence. The students' task was to find a missing archaeological team and bring valuable antiques back to the university. Something caught the protagonist's attention. Something flew right next to him in the cave. The boy explained to the worried teacher that his head was just a little bit foggy. The bandits with paper masks decided to kill the uninvited guests so that they would not be disturbed while searching for the treasure. None of the guests were supposed to leave this place alive that night, and the leader took out a special weapon with needles. The protagonist's hearing did not fail him, and he realized that someone from the outside was about to attack them. The cave's visitors had to be as careful as possible to protect themselves from an ambush. Thanks to the efforts of the protagonist, his friends were protected from the attack, and the bandit was very unhappy because he didn't hit anyone. The guards prepared to shoot and drew their weapons. They didn't understand who was next to them. Several figures appeared in the darkness of the cave. The teacher reassured the students and said they weren't ghosts. The guards prepared to shoot at the strangers and demanded that they stop. The masked bandits were afraid of nothing and were confident that the guards would not stop them. There was no time to waste, and the fighter began shooting his pistol at the attacking stranger. The bandit launched magic needles from his hands to counter the bullets. He ran quickly forward. The bullets were fired at the bandits. The poisoned needles were aimed in the opposite direction and were supposed to hit the guards. The pistols failed to protect the fighters. They suffered severe needle wounds and lost their sight. The girlfriends were very scared because the bandits had just killed their guards. One of the militants decided to have some fun with his friends and 3 women. The leader grinned evilly and agreed to his friend's proposal to take 1 woman each. The criminal's joy was interrupted by the protagonist's voice. He reminded them that they had forgotten about him. The leader turned around and realized that he had almost forgotten about the presence of the guy next to him. In the bandit's opinion, E looked very weak, and he decided to deal with him himself, since he had experience in such things. The attacker decided to knock the guy out with 1 blow, and he threw his powerful weapon at him with all his might. The purple ball flying toward him seemed audacious to the protagonist. He raised his hand to fight it off. For Avu, such an attack was completely useless. He continued to fight off the flying ball. The smoke bomb exploded with bright smoke, and it turned out that the main character had just been fooled. After the bomb exploded, dangerous pink smoke poured out of it, and the girls and their teacher started coughing. The pink poison was so strong that people began to fall unconscious to the ground. The smoke had no effect on the guy, and he remained standing. To him, it all looked vile and disgusting. The bandit couldn't believe that the main character was okay. He had already decided that the guy must be dead. The weak smoke bomb couldn't knock the guy down. He was safe and sound. The bandit became even more angry and decided to finish off the guy with his huge blade. The protagonist didn't even need to run away. He stood calmly and watched as the knife stopped next to his head. Avu, with the help of 2 fingers of one hand, was able to stop a dangerous dagger right next to his head. The guy's hand had enough strength to break the blade in half without straining. The guy used the broken piece of the knife to finish off the bandit. The main character's ability to catch and use weapons frightened the bandits. The guy seemed unusual to them. Avu was fully prepared to fight off the criminals, even if they attacked him together or individually. The frightened bandits were left with few options to try and deal with the guy. The criminal's secret weapon turned out to be a special magic lamp. He had high hopes for it. The soul-sealing lamp turned out to be an unexpected weapon for the protagonist. The bandit with the lamp in his hands decided that the guy would now fall to his knees in front of him and beg for mercy. The protagonist's silence served as a sign that he was afraid of the weapon in the bandit's hands. The criminal promised to spare the boy's life if he bowed before him right then. The main character did not bow before the criminal and kicked him from below with all his might. The bandit screamed loudly in pain. The guy's blow took him completely by surprise. The bandit began to beg and call for help from his accomplice after the main character hit him. The leader decided to attack the guy with his magic lamp as quickly as possible. The boy liked the lamp, which captured his soul. It was good for him, and he easily dodged its chains. The main character's reflexes were excellent. He calmly moved to the side and dodged the chains flying at him. Evu, thanks to a quick maneuver, made it so that the chain from the lamp pierced one of the bandits. The leader was frightened when he fully realized that he had just killed his accomplice. The tied-up bandit screamed in fear, but he could no longer do anything after his soul began to dissolve. The boss could no longer help his friend. The bandit's soul began to seal itself and be sucked into the center of the lamp. In a very short time, the human body disappeared and the soul of the criminal was trapped inside the magic lamp. The leader fell to his knees in front of the lamp and only managed to apologize to his friend. The bandit no longer needed to repent. The protagonist took the magic lamp into his hand. Evu decided to imprison the second criminal inside a magic lamp right next to his accomplice. A magical chain enveloped the leader from all sides and pulled him inside the artifact to drag him in. Evu stood in complete silence and held a lamp in his hands. There were no more enemies left around him. A suspicious noise inside the cave warned the protagonist that there might still be dangers around. Only now did the guy remember that his girlfriends and the teacher were in the cave with him. To revive the woman, the protagonist brought her a restorative pill. Q swallowed the medicine, and after that she should have woken up, but her eyes still remained closed. After the teacher woke up, she immediately began to look around to see her students. The girls gradually began to come to their senses, but they had a very severe headache after the gas poisoning. The pile of corpses inside the cave really scared the student and she jumped to her feet and screamed. The main character approached his girlfriend to calm her down. She was still looking at the corpses with fear. The student and the teacher sat silently and looked in fear at the corpses around them. Evu did not have time to remove the dead bodies from the cave, and now he did not know what to say to his girlfriends. The main character came up with a funny story about how he defeated all the bandits after picking up a gun from a bodyguard. Evu felt very flattered after his girlfriends praised him and applauded him. The main character, when he was in the cave, saw a strange wall. He decided to approach it. The wall was very hot and the guy opened it with the touch of his hand. A bright light appeared from inside. The guy and his companions found a hole in the main tomb. That's where they needed to go. Evu, together with his companions, decided to go through the hole in the wall inside the tomb and see what was there further. The protagonist wanted there to be other cultivators inside the tomb because there was a rich spiritual energy around it. Evu and her companions entered a huge hall, and after that, the woman noticed something to the side. Human skeletons sat in the center of the room in a large circle, and in the center between them stuck out a large blade. Q looked at the remains of people with interest and bewilderment, and it was unclear what they were doing here and why they were all dead. The woman was most attracted by the ancient sword. She felt the urge to reach out and grab it from the floor. At the very last moment, the protagonist warned the woman not to touch the blade. The woman disobeyed the protagonist and touched the sword. Afterwards, she was thrown aside and he barely caught her in his arms. A woman, Zhang Jiayun, and a group of guys watched the bright explosion of lightning from above the mountain. Jiayun looked closely and realized that she was seeing a magical phenomenon of lightning in front of her. After the spiritual energy of the tomb became saturated, the treasure could appear. The fighters lost contact with the people who were sent inside the cave, and this frightened the woman. Jiayun ran very quickly forward with her fighters into the tomb. The other warriors remained to guard the entrance. The woman was completely fine after falling on the main character and was sitting calmly on the floor. The girls saw real ghosts and hidden fear behind the main character. The revived skeleton looked at the people with displeasure and glowing eyes. He was not happy with their appearance. For the two students, hiding behind their friend was the best solution. A dead man with a shield and sword demanded that people leave his master's domain. The main character was most interested in the name of the owner of the living dead. The skeleton did not answer the man's name of his master, since ordinary servants could not say such a thing. A whole group of the dead decided to quickly kill the uninvited guests. The outsiders had to die. The skeletons didn't tell the main character anything, and after that he decided to kill them as quickly as possible. Evu boldly decided to fight against the skeletons and launched blue lightning from his hands at them. The dead were very weak, and after the attack from the man, they were all scattered far in all directions. Zhang only now realized with surprise that the main character could use magic. The battered skeleton could not understand who the main character was if he was able to defeat him so quickly. For the dead, it didn't matter who the protagonist was. He stood there with a blade in his hands. The skeletons had angered the man, and now they were in trouble. The protagonist swung his blade. The guy's magic was so powerful that the dead simply flew apart. In order for the 1,000-year-old remnant of the soul to survive until today, it would have to suffer a lot. Only now did Chu realize that her classmate was a very unusual person. She didn't understand who he was. Evu continued to assure the woman with a smile that he was just a good guy and she shouldn't be afraid of her. Suddenly, a huge magical sword surrounded by lightning began to descend from the sky onto the people. Evu immediately realized that he saw in front of him the Thunder Sword, which contained lightning magic. At the same time, a group of people ran into the room. Chu and the girls turned away in fear. Jiayun and her soldiers were very unhappy when they saw other people inside the tomb. The woman was very happy when she saw the treasure inside. This meant that she arrived on time. Everything that was happening seemed so banal to the teacher that she thought it was all happening as if in a movie. To ensure that she would obtain the treasure, Jiayun had to crush her competitors inside the tomb. The protagonist had to give the Thunder Sword to Jiayun and her bandits if he wanted to live. Evu wasn't afraid of the attackers. He realized that he was facing another wave of idiots. The bandit asked the commander's permission for his team to deal with the main character. He himself cultivated a little. Jiayun confidently swung her sword and sent her fighters forward to attack the main character. The bandit wanted the protagonist to leave this place. He believed that this was their territory. Ewu turned his head menacingly and looked at his opponent. He prepared to fight him off. With a quick reaction, the main character punched the bandit with a powerful blow and he flew to the side. He didn't like at all that the bandits wanted to take something from him, and he kicked them to the side. Jiayun was amazed by the protagonist's fighting skills. He looked very tough to her. The woman looked at the protagonist's girlfriends and decided that they needed to be taken hostage. The main character's girlfriends were captured, and he didn't understand what the bandits wanted to do with them. Jun was very unhappy with the main character because he killed her people and she wanted to demand something from him. The woman promised the guy to give him his girlfriends if he obediently gave her the Thunder Sword. The protagonist's girlfriends could have died if he had not given the woman the sword she needed. The frightened Jiang did not want to die and she prayed to the protagonist to save her. To calm the kidnappers down, Yiwu pointed the Thunder Sword at them and said they could take it for themselves now. Jaeyun reminded the bandits to keep a close eye on the hostages. She herself wanted to take the treasure. Without thinking twice, the woman jumped high up to quickly grab the sword she needed. Finally, the satisfied Jiayun achieved her goal and was able to grab the magical artifact with her hand. Magic chains flew out from several sides and bound the bandits. They called for help, but it was too late. Evu looked closely at his girlfriends and saw that everything was fine with them. Jiayun was very angry that the guy attacked her people even after she spared him. The protagonist had no choice but to fight his enemies. The woman decided she could kill the guy with a thunder sword. A huge blue magical dragon appeared above the earth, and the main character had to fight against it. He needed to somehow defend himself from the demon flying towards him, and he began to gradually step back. The delighted woman had already decided that the main character would be completely powerless before this power. Without thinking twice, the guy took a huge piece of wall, and with its help calmly fought off the attack of the flying monster. The guy's success really angered the woman. She didn't understand how all this could be possible. A very strong explosion was heard above the ground, and the main character jumped up to attack his rival. Evu angrily shouted at the woman in flight that he would teach her how to use the Thunder Sword. Jiayun decided that her opponent wanted to die and swung her blade to kill him immediately. With the help of very dexterous and quick movements, the main character dodged the sword attack. Ji-yun was unable to hit the guy with her sword. He appeared in front of her completely unexpectedly. With a very deft movement, the protagonist took the weapon from the surprised woman's hands. Evu joyfully shouted at the woman to watch him carefully when he used the weapon. The guy jumped up so quickly and dexterously that the woman didn't have time to notice how he disappeared. After the flight, the protagonist prepared to land in order to activate the artifact at full power. Yiwu angrily showed his opponent how to use the Thunder Sword and slammed it into the ground with all his might. The woman could no longer fight off the attack and simply covered herself with her hand to avoid being hit. The inscription on the blade greatly intrigued the boy. He realized that the sword contained some kind of spell. The boy studied the mysterious inscriptions on the sword very carefully. They could mean something very important. Powerful energy charges passed through the woman's body before she died. Jiayun's lifeless body fell from a great height to the floor and remained lying motionless. The woman showed no signs of life, and the frightened people had already decided that she had died. The main character knew perfectly well that the woman was still alive, and he reassured his acquaintances. It was very confusing and suspicious for Chu that his classmate could use magic. The protagonist used cultivation rather than magic in battle. He sat next to a blade embedded in the ground. Bright lightning flashed near the sword. The protagonist sat next to it and pumped up energy. Today's adventure wasn't all that useless for the guy. He accidentally encountered 9 heavy thunder spells. A bright phenomenon appeared above the ancient tomb. This could be a treasure appearing. The old man decided to call his subordinate Jiayun back. He thought she might have gotten the treasure. The woman didn't answer the repairman and her number was unavailable. He realized something was wrong. The guy's cultivation was successful and he managed to reach the required level. Jiayun's strength returned and she came to her senses. The protagonist was distracted from cultivating because of her voice. Evu decided to finish off the woman as quickly as possible. She was still clinging to her life. Jiayun didn't want to die, and she asked the guy in a frightened voice to have mercy on her. The woman told the boy that she was from the Guanshan sect and had come to this place on the instructions of her mentor. She needed to find the Thunder Sword. After talking to the woman, the protagonist realized that even at this time there were many cultivator sections. Avu, and had no intention of giving the sword to the woman since it belonged to him and said that she could leave. Jaeyoon was ready to go with the guy and work with him. She promised him to do whatever he wanted. The woman needed to leave with the protagonist now. She had failed the mission and would have certainly died if she had returned. The protagonist told his female acquaintances that they had to leave. He didn't want to take Jaeyoon with him. The student was very happy that they would finally get out of this place. The main character wanted to erase the memories in his friends' brains using magic. Iwoo erased the memories in his friends' heads so that they wouldn't tell anyone about his cultivation. The next morning, the guy was with his girlfriends. They were relaxing. The girls were fast asleep on the bed while the guy was busy studying the artifacts. The manuscripts from the tomb were ancient, but not very valuable, and he studied them in detail. He woke up after a long sleep and could not understand where they were now. The protagonist reassured the woman and confirmed that she was in their project team's office. Avu told the woman that he brought them from the tomb when they passed out due to lack of oxygen. The main character felt unwell and needed to leave immediately. His health was starting to fail. Q was surprised when the guy suddenly turned around and headed to the bathroom. She could rest a little. The main character couldn't find the right toilet and had to ask the builders in the hallway about it. EV ran forward into the booth as quickly as possible. He didn't really look around anymore and didn't know if he had entered the right place. The surprised stranger didn't understand why the guy came into her booth. The protagonist didn't have time to figure anything out. The girl threw him aside with a sharp gesture, considering him a pervert. The girl in the white coat decided to severely punish the guy for unexpectedly coming to her toilet. Avu. He didn't expect such agility from a stranger and she prepared to hit him at full speed. The boy's body was pierced by poisoned needles. As a result, he wouldn't have been able to move for the entire day. All day long, now the main character had to remain motionless in the toilet as a punishment. The protagonist was completely paralyzed. The woman told him that he got what he deserved. The upset Ivu could not understand why he was being punished. He considered himself a victim. Two schoolgirls were talking about the new professor at Zhang Xiaohua Medical School. Zhang became a brilliant doctor at the age of 20 and was admired by her students. The main character pushed his foot against the door with all his might and did not allow the schoolgirl to enter the booth. Due to blocked meridians after the attack from the woman, the guy could not move fully. The main character's salvation was to use internal energy to open the meridians so that he wouldn't have to sit in that place all day. Thanks to the use of internal energy, all the poisonous needles from the guy's body began to fly out. Evu was glad when he was able to jump to his feet. He decided to find the woman to settle the score with her. Professor Jiang Xiaohua entered the office and greeted the employee. Information materials were prepared for the professor and requested. The secretary was ready to give them to her. Jiang was delighted by all this and praised the worker. At that moment, someone ran into the room. The stranger, accompanied by several fighters, finally found Jiang Xiaohua. The secretary was unhappy with the appearance of uninvited guests in the school office. Outsiders were not allowed in here. The bandit was very determined and he took out a weapon to use against the secretary. The woman did not expect that the attacker would throw a weapon at her body and she screamed. Due to great fear and surprise, Jiang stood and could not move. She did not know what to do now. Jiang found out who had just come to her with a weapon. Liu Guishan offered to talk to the woman. Liu really wanted to get the plant with the divine aroma from the last auction from the woman, but she had already given it away. The kidnappers decided to take the girl on the orders of their commander and began to tie her up. The tied-up Zhang in the trunk tried to break free, but the kidnapper shouted at her to sit quietly and not waste oxygen. The main character stood calmly on the sidewalk and watched as the car with the kidnappers and the victim drove away. Avu noticed that a woman was kidnapped right in front of him, and he decided to come to her aid. The main character glanced after the departing car and realized that he needed to check everything. An hour later, the kidnappers brought their victim to an abandoned warehouse. Liu decided to give the tied-up victim one last chance. She did not agree to his proposal. The bandit wanted the woman to call and ask for the plant back. He threw her the phone for this purpose. Zhang refused to cooperate with the bandit and then spat on him as an answer. Liu became even more angry when the woman spat on him instead of agreeing to the proposal. Zhang bought the plant for herself with her own money, and the bandit had no right to take it from her. Liu completely began to lose patience and beat the woman with all his strength. He decided that she deserved it. The kidnapper already wanted to take the plant today, and if the woman did not agree, he threatened to kill her. The angry bandit tore a piece of clothing from the tied-up victim. She refused to help him. Yewu came just in time to help the woman. Liu didn't expect that someone could get into this place at such a moment. The main character felt very cheerful when he saw a group of bandits in front of him. The guards didn't understand why a strange guy came here when the young master was settling some business. Zhang immediately recognized the protagonist. He shouldn't have been here, since she had paralyzed him earlier with poisoned needles. Liu should have gotten on his knees and apologized to the girl. Then, the main character would have let him go. The bandit had no intention of apologizing to the guy. He decided to attack him with a weapon. The frightened Jiang decided that the guy would be killed right before her eyes. There were a lot of bandits around. The kidnappers stood around the main character and did not agree with him leaving. Liu didn't take the opportunity from the main character to apologize to the girl. The enraged kidnapper demanded that his fighters kill the guy. A group of bandits angrily rushed forward to quickly attack the main character. The frightened woman warned the guy to be careful. She was afraid for his health. The guy had such a quick and precise reaction that he carefully and accurately dodged the blade strike. Avu was able to intercept the opponent's attack and with a quick movement grabbed his hand. Now the weapon from the bandit's hands fell into the hands of the protagonist, and he prepared to use it. Avu, using a combat blade, dealt with the kidnappers and scattered them to the sides with powerful blows. Liu couldn't believe the guy's abilities. Jean was very surprised that the guy turned out to be so strong. Now it was the young master's turn, and the main character prepared to rush at him with a knife. Liu didn't expect the guy to attack him so quickly. The main character was running at full speed. The kidnapper started calling for help. He hid behind the tied woman on a chair. Ivu was angry because the kidnapper was using the woman as a shield. At that moment, another bandit with blades ran up behind him. The main character defended himself from his opponent's blow with a large knife. The opponent turned out to be very strong. Avu couldn't stand still after another powerful blow from the bandit. It turned out he had a lot of energy. The main character's opponent this time turned out to be a cultivator, and it would have been quite difficult for him to fight. Liu was happy that a good fighter came to his aid. The bandit promised the young master that he would cut the guy into pieces. Jean shouted in a frightened voice at the protagonist to run away quickly, as he was facing a martial arts master. Jiang Qiang, with a large weapon in his hands, threatened the protagonist that he would die today. Yiwu didn't really believe in his opponent's abilities and decided to see when he would try to kill him. Jiang decided not to waste time and attacked the protagonist with a weapon at full speed. Large clouds of purple smoke appeared around the martial artist. The protagonist watched him closely. Yiwu assessed his opponent's abilities and swung his blade to strike him. Jiang got scared and barely managed to jump back sharply and quickly from the guy's attack. Liu couldn't believe his fighter was losing so easily to the main character. Jiang was also watching and was very worried about the guy. The master on the ground realized that the guy standing in front of him was a guy who practiced martial arts. The bandit just wanted to kill the main character, but now he himself ended up on Earth. Jiang made a big mistake when he underestimated his opponent. He rushed forward to attack him again. The protagonist, with a deft movement, let his opponent pass ahead and prepared to finish him off from behind with a blade. After being hit by the main character, the bandit lay on the ground in a pool of blood and was no longer able to get up. Jiang could not come to terms with his defeat. He did not understand how this could have happened. Liu lost his best fighter. It was incomprehensible to him that Jiang Qiang was killed so instantly. Now it was the young master's turn to try to kill the main character, but Liu was very scared. Liu was still on his knees, begging for forgiveness. Avu approached him and sternly asked what he had done wrong. The boss started beating himself with his hands and screaming that he had kidnapped a woman and was hunting for a plant. Therefore, he deserved to die. As punishment, the protagonist cut off the frightened kidnapper's hand with a blade. The bandit was given the chance to escape. His severed hand was the price for the kidnapping. Liu took advantage of the opportunity to escape and began to quickly run away. The protagonist decided to turn to the woman. The hostage was completely safe and she fearfully asked the guy who he was. The guy decided to help the woman and untie her. He told her his name. Yiwu apologized to the hostage for going into the wrong toilet earlier and that she shouldn't have worried. A huge truck drove into the room. Someone decided to try to knock the main character down. Yiwu was unable to jump to the side in time, and a large car knocked him down at full speed. The car driver threw the passenger out of the cabin so that she could identify the main character. Lin Kun sternly demanded from his lying accomplice that she get the treasures today. The main character came to his senses and was very unhappy because someone hit him with a car. The lying woman pointed at the guy with her hand and confirmed that it was he who stole the treasure from the tomb. Avu, he never expected to meet this woman again. He really hoped that he had already gotten rid of her earlier. Lin was very surprised that the main character survived after being run over by a car. The woman decided to help the guy and asked if everything was okay. He had only broken his left arm and was in a slight daze. Zhang decided to heal the protagonist with silver needles so that he would be okay. Avu decided to do without the woman's help and take his healing pills to recover. The guy took the medicine and felt great relief. He began the healing process. Lin angrily demanded that the guy give him the treasure and not ignore him. Yewu refused to give the thief the treasure. He decided to try to finish off the tench. The bandit threatened the guy that he would take the treasure from him himself and threw a bunch of knives at him. The Jian next to the guy looked at the knives flying at them and they would not have time to defend themselves from them. Avu decided to protect his new girlfriend and shouted at her to be careful. The guy grabbed the woman and quickly fell to the ground with her to protect her from the flying blades. Avu fell to the ground together with the woman and protected her with his body in time from the powerful attack. Lin warned the protagonist that there were things he would not be able to take and prepared to attack him with a knife. The main character, due to an injury, could not use his power and fully defend himself together with the Jian. Avu strained himself to the maximum and concentrated to try to fight off the bandit running towards him. The protagonist, with a knife at his throat, had one last chance to give up the treasure. Jean grabbed a club and decided to hit the bandit on the head with all her strength to help her friend. The bandit never expected a strong blow from behind. He thought that the frightened woman would not dare attack him. The angry Tench became distracted from the main character and decided to attack the woman after she dared to hit him. Jian managed to put her club in front of her to defend herself from the bandit's blade attack. You took out a magic sword and used it to stop the bandit's blade. Lin could now take this treasure if he had enough strength. Lin was delighted and reached out to the hilt of the sword. He was no longer going to retreat any further. The bandit couldn't just take the weapon from the protagonist's hands. Lightning bolts from the sword started flying at him. Lin was forced to lean back from the guy with the sword. The protagonist timed the moment very well. The main character only had to finish off the kidnapper with a powerful blow of his sword. The Tench was unable to defend itself in any way, and after the guy's attack it flew far back. He was so carried away by the battle that he didn't even notice the attack against him. A flying knife pierced him. The boy didn't have the strength to fight off the serious injury and was thrown into the wall after being hit. He developed a bloody cough. Lin assumed that the main character would be very strong against him, but he stood beaten near the wall. The evil bandit reached for his sword and decided to finish off his showy rival. The blade in the bandit's hand was very dangerous. He wished the protagonist to burn in hell before striking. Avu very quickly got the hang of it and rushed to the side in order to have time to take the magic pill. The bandit decided that the protagonist was unworthy of such a weapon as a magic sword. He prepared to finish him off. It was absolutely surprising and incomprehensible to Lin how the exhausted guy was able to stop his blade with his hand. Having waited for the right moment, the protagonist swung his leg to kick his opponent in the stomach with all his might. The bandit tried to escape. The protagonist jumped to his feet and his strength had already returned. The protagonist accurately shot the fleeing kidnapper in the back. He wondered how far he had managed to get. Due to the large number of corpses, the frightened woman decided to call the police. The guy started to have a really bad headache because he was using a lot of spiritual energy. Jian knelt down next to the protagonist to help him. The boy felt increasingly weak. The woman decided to call an ambulance because she no longer had silver needles to treat her boyfriend. Jian reported the injured person to emergency services by phone. Half an hour later, the main character and his companion were racing inside an ambulance. Jian really wanted the main character to stay alive with her. She was sitting near the couch with the guy. The main character was lying in a hospital ward and no one could help him because the head doctor had gone to intensive care. Nurses were running around. The patient had a stable pulse, meaning he had merely lost consciousness. A patient collapsed unconscious in the corner of the room. Nurses ran over to check on him. Zhang ran and decided to get silver needles from the Chinese medical department to try to treat the guy. After the guy woke up and sat up in bed, he couldn't understand how he ended up in the hospital. He needed to get into the spiritual mine as soon as possible to restore his energy, otherwise he would pass out again. On a crowded street, there was a huge poster with a picture of a young guy. They were showing some kind of advertisement there. The worker informed the boss that they were almost finished preparing. The boss at the desk asked what about the actors. The question about the actors really surprised the subordinate, and he didn't know what to tell his boss now. The boss sternly reminded him that they needed actors pretending to be patients for advertising, and he could end up playing the divine doctor. After that, the subordinate ran off to sort things out. In half an hour, a group of actors standing near the bus were promised double pay for their performance. They needed to show off their skills. The weakened protagonist could barely stand on his feet. He was looking for a way out of the hospital. Avu felt worse and worse and almost fell on a standing worker. The angry man decided that the guy was pretending to be sick and weak just because he wanted to get a job. The unconscious protagonist was taken to the show in the back of a car. The worker decided that the guy was playing very well. Zhang ran into the room very quickly and shouted to the guy that she was back, but it was empty inside. The patient was nowhere to be found. The astonished woman could not understand where the boy could have gone. The audience prepared to enter the large building. They bought tickets to watch Dr. Zhuo demonstrate his treatments and medical skills. People were sitting down on a chair in the hall. A subordinate informed his boss that he had found a very good actor for him. The presenter jumped onto the stage with a microphone and shouted to the people in the audience to calm down. The audience was informed that their divine doctor's show was about to begin. Xue Guqin was invited onto the stage. The doctor stood up from his seat and walked forward. The audience greeted the healer with applause as he walked across the stage. He prepared to perform. When it began to tell the guests details about the life and work of doctors, after the introductory speech, the doctor grabbed the red tablecloth on the table and prepared to begin. The medic threw the red tablecloth off the table and wanted to show the audience something important. The doctor prepared to treat the patient using his family's silver needles, the Bianche. The audience was very interested and amazed by the needles for healing. They were delighted. Sue held the needles in the box in his hands. If this medicine were promoted to people, it would be beneficial. The medic on stage offered people to buy this rare treasure at a very affordable price. The audience in the hall was not very sure whether the healing needles would work. To demonstrate the life-giving power of his needles, the doctor asked that a patient be brought to him. The protagonist was brought to the medic. He was still lying unconscious on the couch. Zhu, using acupuncture needles, wanted to show the miraculous effect to the audience. The medic had a magical artifact in his pocket. A powerful energy began to emanate from it. The doctor took out needles and prepared to insert them into the patient's body. The energy around him grew stronger. The protagonist suddenly came to his senses and looked at Shu in surprise. He didn't understand what he was doing. The doctor was very unhappy that the patient woke up before he even started using the needle. It was completely unexpected for the main character that he began to receive spiritual energy from somewhere. After taking a closer look, the guy found the energy source. It was a small artifact in the guy's pocket. Sue sternly demanded that the protagonist play along with him, otherwise he wouldn't get the money. Ye Wu didn't understand what they were demanding of him. After the doctor's explanation, the boy understood everything, but asked for a jade pendant as a reward instead of money. Sui didn't want to give up the family heirloom. The revelation was very dangerous for the doctor, and he fearfully agreed to give the guy what he wanted. The protagonist was delighted. He realized that he would receive a much-needed reward. The doctor told the patient to lie down. He was prepared to use needles on him. He felt a strong pain from the needle prick and jumped up abruptly. The doctor was frightened when the boy screamed. People were amazed by the work of such a young talent and believed that Yue was a miracle doctor who was able to lift the patient with a silver needle without even suspecting what a show Jujin had put on. At the end of this performance, the main character demanded the promised jade pendant. However, the pseudo-doctor only laughed at his request and said that this would not happen. The perplexed young cultivator began to demand that Shui keep his word. But Jujin said the man simply took advantage of the situation because he was in a desperate situation. He sighed heavily and said that he gave him the opportunity not to become a laughingstock, but the guy did not appreciate it. Knowing that Wu would try to take the pendant from him by force, Zhen didn't take any risks. In connection with this, he hastened to call his bodyguards along with the armed thug Danu. 3 thugs immediately burst into the room, but this was no problem for Beichin. Naturally, the young master was prepared for such a scenario, which was not uncommon in this world. The naive Tsu jumped up from his chair and walked towards Ye with a businesslike gait, a grin suddenly appearing on his face. However, with just one sharp movement, the teenager was able to moderate the ardor of the arrogant Shui. A moment later, the miracle doctor assumed a horizontal position. A stunned Zhen immediately ordered his henchmen to teach the upstart a lesson. Grabbing a huge club, Nu rushed towards Wu, naively believing that this would have the desired effect. Having dealt a crushing blow, Da was still unable to harm the self-confident guy, who in turn dodged the attack and carried out a series of counterattacks, after which Bacon immediately attacked the rest of Jujin's bodyguards. And after a couple of seconds, they joined their leader. Zhui was shocked by what happened. Crawling back to the wall, the frightened doctor urged the young man to calm down. With a lightning-fast movement, Ye grabbed him by the robe and menacingly demanded that he hand over the jade pendant. Naturally, Zhen gave him the amulet, holding out his hand, trembling with fear, in which was the treasured artifact. Terrible. Ye snatched the jade pendant from his hands and said that this situation would serve as a good lesson for him for the future, after which he turned businesslike towards the exit, adding that he should not deceive people anymore. After a certain amount of time, Wu returned to school, where he was met by a worried Zhang. The young man asked what was causing his anxiety, and Jiwen told him that there had recently been an inspection at the university. Suddenly, Beichin interrupted his monologue and asked him to leave him alone. Wen immediately fell silent. The guy himself began to cultivate with the help of a magical amulet, which contributed to his clairvoyance technique. Thus, Ye was able to find out that Jin and Kun had started the construction in order to find some things buried underground. The old man said that the last time they were at this place, they dug up a tablet that mentioned a treasure. Naturally, the young master decided to find out what exactly the objects were in question. At that moment, Wu literally vanished into thin air before the eyes of his classmate Zhang. Jiwen, in turn, could not believe what had happened and looked around for a long time. After all, he had never seen such magic before, especially from such young cultivators. Meanwhile, Ye rushed to the construction site where the excavations, which were led by Jin, were taking place. The guy also remembered that the building of 10,000 treasures was the legacy of the Qing-Yun sect. It was hard for him to believe that after so many years it had finally been found. Suddenly, the builders called out to him. Assuming that the boy intended to get a job with them, one of them approached Wu with this question. Naturally, Bachin played along and replied that he was indeed interested in this. The foreman noted that in that case he would have to go through a probationary period. At that moment, there was a sudden explosion and the gate behind them instantly opened. The frightened builders rushed to find out what really happened. Initially, it was not possible to understand this, because a thick fog of dust rose up in the area. Finally reaching the huge crater, the workers stated that this was not the first time this had happened, and that the pit was constantly being filled with rocks. A moment later, Jin and his friend Lin appeared on the horizon, and they immediately rushed towards the ravine. The builders, in turn, dispersed to the sides, while the old man approached the cliff. Declaring that he intended to find out the situation inside, Jin took out some kind of artifact that looked like a compass. Then the elder muttered something about a green dragon and a white tiger coming down from the mountains. Adding that the place had strong spiritual energy, Kun asked if there were any treasures here. The old man replied that there were more than enough, and Lin immediately broke into a smile. After which, Jin urged his partner to take more people to implement their insidious plan. A couple of minutes later, the contractor headed towards his workers with the intention of sending them deeper into the tomb for reconnaissance. There was a huge number of people willing to go down into the dungeon, which was not surprising. Among them, naturally, was the young cultivator Yi, since that was why he came to the construction site. Soon, the foreman announced that they would go down into the mine, and everyone was happy. Having reported this to Lin, they began to prepare for their journey, not even suspecting what awaited them. Kun noted that he also intended to join them in the reconnaissance operation. The naive workers believed that they would soon become fabulously rich. Finally, having gone down, everyone began to look around carefully. Lin declared that this place did not look like a tomb. Wu, in turn, felt an incredible surge of spiritual energy, suggesting that the source of the unknown aura was very close. After going several dozen meters deep, they discovered a huge underground palace. The builders immediately began whispering among themselves, saying that this was a real relic. As a result, all the workers immediately rushed to take possession of the mine's treasures. Yi continued to carefully examine the architecture and came to the conclusion that there really could be a treasure tower here. Meanwhile, Jin's subordinates discovered huge chests containing various ornaments and precious stones. But as soon as they began to rake in all the goods, the palace suffered an earthquake. The foreman assumed that everything would collapse again and ordered everyone to leave the area immediately. At that moment, the spirit of an unknown person descended upon them and asked who dared to disturb the peace of the Hall of Souls. Hiding behind a rock, Wu continued to watch what was happening, realizing that this would not lead to anything good. Kun, in turn, greeted the ghost, saying that spirits still live here. However, most of the workers rushed to the exit in panic, which was to be expected. A second later, two ghosts appeared in front of them, blocking their passage. They instantly attacked the intruders and the builders were sent flying. The contractor immediately turned to Lin for help, as he himself was unable to resist the ancient creatures. Kun immediately rushed to attack using his magical daggers, which headed towards the ghosts with incredible speed. Everyone was shocked by his skills. Meanwhile, Lin's knives pierced the spiritual bodies, which, as it turned out, they did not expect. Jin's subordinates rejoiced and began to say that Kun was simply incredible and extremely strong. The spirits themselves could not believe that such a powerful cultivator had come to them. Meanwhile, Lin Yi decided to catch one of them in order to interrogate him and find out where the treasure was. However, he also faced worthy resistance from the ghost warriors. As a result, the fire dragon headed towards Kun, who did not have time to react. Subsequently, he was subjected to a lightning-fast sonic attack from the released monster. The result was not long in coming, and Lin instantly flew into the wall behind him. Bachin, in turn, without thinking twice, rushed to the aid of his former enemy in the person of Kun. The spirit, meanwhile, hastened to strike again, declaring that violators of the ruler's territory would be destroyed. Exhausted, Lin Yi prepared to take defensive action, but at the last moment he saw Ye. The guy pushed him aside and began to restrain the ghostly guard of the tomb. Swinging his powerful blade, the spirit was able to wound the protagonist. The young cultivator backed away, realizing that he needed to be handled with more caution. Kun, in turn, also began to realize that the ghosts were extremely dangerous and would be quite difficult to resist. Taking advantage of the moment, Lin immediately fled, leaving Wu alone. However, a moment later he saw how the young man was able to outwit the ancient creature, which was amazing. The spiritual guard was also amazed by such a quick and capable guy, who, a couple of seconds later, appeared behind the bewildered ghostly warrior. And since Bachin had previously set up a magic seal, the spiritual warrior could do nothing. A moment later, he completely evaporated, which is exactly what the teenager wanted. Kun was shocked by the young man's skills and could not understand where such strength came from. Meanwhile, the enraged ghosts rushed towards Wu, intending to avenge their brother. At the same time, they did not hesitate to use various techniques to catch the guy off guard. However, Ye used the power of the magic lamp in an attempt to induce soul binding. In this way, he managed to chain the phantom snakes that were directed at him. Naturally, the spirits understood perfectly well what the young man had in mind and began to retreat back. One of them suddenly called on the others to run away to avoid the soul sealing, but Beichin still managed to grab them with those magic chains. Everyone was shocked. The ghost warriors, in turn, tried to break the shackles, but they were unable to do so. The foreman wondered if this man was a martial arts master. After a certain amount of time, the miraculous lamp E still absorbed most of the perfume. At that moment, the businesslike Lin approached the guy and praised him for the work he had done. At the same time, Kun asked the teenager if he was a member of the Banshan sect. All the builders immediately began to thank Lin, calling him their savior. Wu merely played along with them, knowing full well that he was surrounded by ordinary sycophants. Kun, in turn, urged them to refocus on searching for precious treasures. At this time, they came across another ghost guard, and Yilin rushed towards him. The workers immediately dispersed throughout the room, not wanting to take part in the battle with the spirit. The extremely self-confident Kun grabbed him by the head and threatened him, urging him to tell the truth. Naturally, he was interested in the location of the treasure tower, but the spirit was in no hurry to talk about it. Hearing their conversation, Ye slowly moved towards Lin and the spiritual warrior. However, the dead man flatly refused to reveal the secret of the jewels, despite Kun's threats. Hu intended to make him talk, but he failed, because at that moment the ghost evaporated, leaving behind a thick fog of uncertainty. A frightened Lin assumed that something terrible was about to happen, and called on everyone to lie down on the ground. A moment later there was an explosion, after which a small glow appeared to the side. All the workers immediately ran away because they didn't know what else to expect from this place. The extremely concerned contractor rushed to Kun's aid, asking if he was okay. But suddenly, Lin became embittered and pushed the foreman away, declaring that he was perfectly fine. Thus, a new path opened up before them in the form of a hole in the wall. A tunnel was visible in the dissipating fog, and Bacon, like Kun, became curious about what awaited them next. The unknown seemed to beckon them, and naturally they could not miss such a chance. Wu once again felt incredible spiritual energy and realized that something unusual was ahead. After a couple of minutes, Lin called everyone to leave their things and go with him to the cave. However, some of them began to doubt whether it was safe, since life was more valuable than any treasure. But the stubborn foreman insisted that if the builders stayed there, they could simply die. Meanwhile, Yi, without thinking twice, headed into the dungeon to find out what awaited him. Soon they all headed towards immeasurable wealth deep within the mine. The cave was littered with suspicious crystals, and Wu suddenly said that this was a place of spirits. Several builders stopped and began to look around carefully. The unceremonious Kun ordered his contractor to go forward in an extremely brazen manner. The foreman turned around and stuttered, asking if it was absolutely safe, which only angered Lin. Hu in turn hit him and told him that he should do something and not ask questions. The frightened boy slowly moved forward, not knowing what awaited him in the depths of the dungeon. Looking around frantically, he came to the conclusion that the cave was safe after all. The contractor quickly informed the others about this and urged them to move on. But at that very moment, an enraged leopard attacked him, and everyone was in shock. In a split second, the beast gnawed through his neck. Everything happened too quickly, and no one had time to do anything. The workers rushed back to the exit in panic, realizing that this was a rather dangerous place. However, the young cultivator, just like Lin, had no intention of retreating. Meanwhile, the enraged leopard found its next victim and attacked one of the builders. At the same time, the monster opened its mouth and released some kind of magical sphere, which was also unexpected. As a result, the sparkling ball followed the fleeing people, and a moment later he reached his numerous targets, followed by an explosion. The stunned Kun could not believe that he would meet a spirit beast in the cave. The leopard then moved slowly towards Lin, declaring that all intruders would die. Realizing that a fight was inevitable, Kong Yi instantly armed himself with his magical daggers. However, the glittering knives did not catch the monster, which was getting closer and closer. Eventually, the spirit beast ended up a few meters away from the frightened Lin. With a lightning-fast movement, the leopard cut off his hand, and the bloody leader immediately ran back. Turning around, Kun called out to the young master in a pitiful voice to help him. Wu slowly took off his helmet, and with a smile on his face asked if he didn't recognize him. Naturally, Lin recognized him as that very brave man and asked him in return what he needed. Beichin, in turn, said that he should have listened to him, but now it was too late. Realizing that he was in a dire situation, Kun began to run away. Yi immediately pulled out his thunderblade and said that now he definitely couldn't escape. And just a few seconds later, the teenager's sword caught up with Lin, piercing him right through. After which the young man switched to the leopard, declaring that he had no shortage of talent since he had managed to survive in such conditions. The spirit beast noted that flattery would not save him because the boy dared to invade someone else's territory. But a moment later he sensed an incredible aura in the young body and therefore changed his mind. Wu in turn said that any animal remains such until the end of its days, adding that each of them could get what they want and part ways peacefully. The extremely surprised leopard decided to clarify what exactly the guy was talking about. Then Beichin offered him to give his spiritual energy in exchange for what he wanted. However, the self-confident beast refused to negotiate with a man who, according to him, was not worthy of it. As he pounced on the young cultivator, Ye instantly prepared for battle. In connection with this, Wu immediately activated a magical barrier, sparkling with incredible energy, which had the desired effect, as the leopard stopped instantly, having seen the man's true strength, after which he even asked the master for forgiveness, saying that he had been mistaken about him. Beichin smiled back and urged him to return immediately to their discussion of the deal. Naturally, the animal, scared to death, agreed to conduct this much-needed dialogue. Wu then asked directly if there was a famous treasure tower in this dungeon. The spirit beast apparently didn't expect such a question and tensed up again, but the guy quickly calmed him down. The leopard immediately replied that in fact there was something here that the man was interested in. Then he even pointed out the location of this tower, which is what the guy expected. He immediately rushed in that direction, saying that if he had deceived him, there would be no salvation for him. After a certain amount of time, the protagonist arrived at the designated place where bricks covered in blue flames were waiting for him. The beast explained that these were burnt stones that were used to build that very tower. However, the leopard did not know where the tower itself was located. The young cultivator was furious. In this regard, he said that he should have finished off the useless animal. Then the young master took out his jade pendant and said that he could not leave here empty-handed, after which he began to nourish the amulet with the spiritual energy that inhabited the cave. The stunned beast watched what was happening, realizing that this man was truly incredible. Beichin also decided to take the jewels that were scattered throughout the dungeon. The leopard suddenly asked to be taken away as well, since without the necessary aura he would simply die. He agreed to get another pet and companion for his dog. Meanwhile, Jin began to get nervous because it was already dark, but Lin and the builders still had not returned. A few minutes later, Wu appeared in front of him, and the old man was surprised by the guy's appearance. The young man greeted the elder and said that he was the only one who had managed to escape. The teenager continued to play the role of a construction worker, and Jin naturally believed him. He started asking about the others, as he was waiting for his partner Kun-Yi. However, Yi sadly stated that absolutely everyone died and their bodies remained in the dungeon. The old man was shocked by such unexpected news and simply did not know what to say. Beichin continued to say that they were surrounded by a huge number of ghostly monsters. But the elder still suspected something was wrong, believing that the guy was lying to him and trying to outsmart him. Generating magical claws, Jin immediately dealt a crushing blow to his back. He instantly fell to the ground, but the old man declared that he could not be so easily deceived. At the same time, he urged him to tell the truth in order to avoid dire consequences. Wu then decided to pretend to be weak so that he could find out about the treasure tower. After telling about the treasures in the underground palace, the young man also mentioned that Lin had indeed died at the hands of the spirits. Beichin also told him the story of the bricks with magical fire that he saw. The elder thought about it, and Wu in turn hoped that Jin would fall for his trick. In connection with this, he pretended that he had no idea about any treasures and began to ask the old man why he needed this tower. The leader of the Banshan sect sighed heavily and said that he would tell him, especially since the boy didn't have much time left anyway. After which, Jin told about the Qing Yun monument and the many cultivation techniques located in the treasure tower. The young master suddenly stood up and asked the elder if he had any more information about this palace. The bewildered old man asked him a counter question about what he was counting on and why he had gotten up from his knees. Wu smiled and replied that he wanted to get more information about the tower, but Jin made a fatal mistake by saying obvious nonsense. The embittered leader of the Banshan group again stated that the young man should not have played a prank on him. He added that the boy had completely forgotten who he was talking to and was clearly looking for death. A moment later, the young cultivator armed himself with his thunderblade, after which he entered into a fight with the furious Jin, who clearly did not expect such a turn of events. The extremely self-confident Ye noted that he was too weak for an elder. As a result of their battle, the old man could not withstand such a powerful blow from the teenager and was thrown back several meters. Beichin immediately followed him, thus not giving him the opportunity to get to his feet. At the same time, the guy stated that if Jin obeyed him, he would leave him alive. The shocked old man asked who he was. Ye smiled and replied that his clan was called Qing Yun. The head of Banshan was horrified, saying that this school had long ceased to exist. The young man, in turn, again called on him to become a personal informant in the case of the treasure tower. Naturally, Jin agreed to help Wu find out the location of this temple. After Bacon forced him to swallow a certain pill, the old man obeyed him. When asked what exactly he had given him, the teenager broke into a sly grin. The guy said that it was a poison that would kill him in 10 days, and only he had an antidote. Thus, Wu expended an excessive amount of spiritual power, which led to some unfavorable consequences, so he decided to find a secluded place to solve this problem. However, at the most inopportune moment, Xiaohua, who had been looking for him for a long time, caught up with him. He tried to correct the situation by saying that everything was not as it might seem to her. As a result, the main character once again found himself in an extremely absurd situation. Finally, everything came to its senses, and the young cultivator asked Zhang what she was doing here. Then the girl said that she was actually very worried about him, and that's why she went looking for him. Wu decided to rectify the situation and invited her to dinner, declaring that he would buy her whatever she wanted. Surprised, Xiaohua stopped abruptly and asked where he got the money. Having shown her a huge number of different jewels, he replied that this should be enough. Zhang was stunned by this unexpected turn of events and could not understand where he got so much gold from. The young master also encouraged her to choose the piece of jewelry she liked, and of course she agreed. After which, Hua simply took his entire bag of treasures from him. To her surprise, the teenager was not at all against it, stating that he had enough similar products. In fact, Xiao just wanted to play a joke on him, but Beichin actually gave her the jewelry. At the same time, he urged her to help him sell the rest of the gold jewelry. The puzzled girl asked if he had really robbed someone. The guy smiled and said that she shouldn't ask so many questions. After some time, they went to the appraiser, who began to examine the treasures. He understood perfectly well that such things in the current situation cost a lot of money. The old man caught himself thinking that these precious items were more expensive than his antique shop. But since the people in front of him were so young, the appraiser decided to cheat and lower the price. In connection with this, he began to assert that the thing was truly worthy of attention. However, at the same time, the old man said that the antiques did not have much value since they were not ancient artifacts. Wu realized that he was trying to deceive him, and taking the precious stone, he hurried to leave the room. But at the last moment, the shop worker asked him not to rush to conclusions. He broke into a smile and asked again if he really wanted to buy something that had no particular value. The old man replied that in fact he was forced to behave in this way, after which he offered the young man 5 million for the antique. However, the teenager named a price of 50 million, which simply shocked the old man. The appraiser couldn't have imagined that the guy would be so knowledgeable in this industry. At that moment, there was a momentary pause between them, and Bacon decided not to waste time. But the old man immediately stopped him and wrote out a check for 50 million in order to finally get the much-desired stone. Xiaohua watched in shock and couldn't believe that this was actually true. And as soon as the young people headed for the exit, the shop worker hurried to contact his boss, to whom he told that a certain person had a lot of good things, as well as money. Meanwhile, Wu and Jiang took a taxi and went to a restaurant to celebrate the occasion. Hua tried to carefully find out where he got such wealth and whether he was from a rich family. The guy smiled and said that it didn't really matter. At that moment, an expensive sports car appeared on the road, driven by a nervous driver. Overtaking everyone on the way, he was hurrying to a certain appointment, but suddenly he met a taxi driver. Unable to control such a fast car, he was unable to steer to the side. As a result, he found himself a couple of meters away from the young cultivator's car. And a second later, he literally flew into the vehicle, but Ye managed to cover Xiao. Subsequently, the accident participants managed to survive. Moreover, no one was injured. The angry driver of the sports car immediately ran out of it and began to declare that he had just bought it. Wu, in turn, asked Zhang if everything was okay with her, and the girl replied that everything was fine. The distraught stranger meanwhile opened the taxi door and called on the driver to get out of the car. He insisted that the taxi driver was obliged to let him pass, but the guy said that changing lanes was not allowed. The unknown insolent man immediately began to beat him, saying that he had no right to contradict him. The stranger also demanded that the taxi driver compensate him for the damage caused. Naturally, Bacon could not tolerate such rudeness for long and immediately got out of the car. As a result, he intervened in the brawl and called on the insolent man not to raise his hands. He added that it was he who created the emergency situation and simply crashed into their vehicle. The stunned sports car driver immediately tried to start a fight with Wu. After delivering another blow, he noticed that the guy had suddenly disappeared. In connection with this, he began to look around, but the main character was nowhere to be found. A few seconds later, a young cultivator appeared behind him and hit him on the head. The shocked guy said that even his parents had never beaten him, and he certainly had no right to do so. After which the enraged, insolent man took a knife out of his pocket and began waving it. However, the young master grabbed his hand and thus disarmed the brave man. But at that very moment, an unknown person's arrow suddenly shot towards E. Wu managed to react and put the rude sports car driver in harm's way. So the arrow hit him, and he fell dead on the asphalt. Everyone was in shock. Beechin himself immediately rushed to search for the unknown shooter and urged Xiao and the taxi driver to stay put. A few seconds later, the teenager found himself at the suspected location of the attacker and looked around. However, he did not find anyone, realizing that he had most likely managed to escape. Zhang immediately ran up to him and asked if the guy had gotten involved with bandits. Hua grabbed his hand and pulled him along, assuring him that she would take the young man to a safe place. After a certain amount of time, they found themselves in front of the door of her dorm room. The girl said that Wu could hide here for a while, and Ye began to look around. As it turned out, Xiao felt indebted to the teenager because he saved her life. And that is why she volunteered to help him, which came as a surprise to the guy himself. Suddenly, Beichin asked about his sleeping place. The girl said that he would have to sleep on the floor. Finally, they lay down to rest, but sleep disappeared and Yi began to think. Jiang also couldn't sleep, which she told the young man who kept her company, and Hua suddenly asked him why he lied to her, adding that she is not stupid and understands everything, because he suddenly had a mountain of gold, and then bandits were chasing him. The guy sighed heavily and said that he actually had a couple of secrets. The girl supported him, noting that she also had a little secret, after which she began to tell why she decided to come to this school. Wu assumed she simply enjoyed learning, like most girls. But Xiaohua said that in fact her parents were trying to marry her off to a man she didn't like, and that's why she hid here. After chatting for a while, they didn't even notice how they had quietly fallen into a deep sleep. However, in the morning, they were awakened by a sudden knock on the door, and the young people immediately came to their senses. The extremely worried girl asked who was there, and Beichin became wary. A moment later, an unknown voice said that it was him. Zhang was instantly upset. Naturally, she knew this man, and could not understand what he was doing here and why he came. Opening the front door, Hua saw Bin standing on the threshold with a huge bouquet of flowers. Xiao immediately declared that they were not suitable for each other, but the young man reminded them of the agreement between their parents' marriage. Then the young lady decided to take advantage of the moment and said that she actually already had a boyfriend. However, the smug Bin grinned and noted that she had no one and she couldn't deceive him. At that moment, Wu came out of the room into the corridor and asked his beloved what had happened. For the young suitor, this came as a bolt from the blue. He clearly didn't expect this. Beichin introduced himself as Zhang's boyfriend with complete calm and ease, the smile never leaving his face. But Ye decided to finally get rid of him and knelt down in front of Xiao, after which he proposed to her with an engagement ring in his hands. Bin was shocked. Naturally, Hua played along with him since that was exactly what she wanted. At the same time, the embittered teenager noticed a huge ruby on the ring, which only further angered Bin, who became furious at what was happening. Meanwhile, the smiling Xiaohua agreed to marry the main character, which finished off her suitor. However, Bean claimed that he had something much better than this ruby ring. A moment later, he pulled a diamond ring out of his pocket and said that it was worth more than 10 million, adding that he didn't have anything so expensive and that he wasn't at all worthy of Jiang. The young cultivator immediately poured out a multitude of gold items with various stones onto the floor. Then he asked if that was enough to cover the $10 million diamond ring. Naturally, Bean admitted defeat, stating that he had indeed underestimated him. Thus, the young master helped Xiaohua get rid of the overly annoying guy. Ultimately, the teenager couldn't stand the competition and finally left Zhang's room. The girl thanked her savior and said that she did not know how to get rid of this man. Of course, this was not a problem for Bacon, which he stated with a smile. Meanwhile, Bin could not come to terms with what had happened and was literally shaking with anger, because some student was able to surpass him, which had never happened to him before. Suddenly, the guy felt a presence behind him and instantly turned around. However, he never found anyone, which seemed rather strange to him. Suddenly, magical threads from an unknown person rushed towards him and pierced his back. At that moment, Bin couldn't move and didn't understand what was happening to his body. An unknown girl bound him with her abilities, but for what purpose, it was not clear. Jiang, in turn, decided to thank Wu and invited him to dinner, and the guy agreed. But suddenly his phone rang, and the young man said that he urgently needed to answer. Of course, the well-mannered girl did not argue and stepped aside so as not to disturb him. As it turned out, it was Chu who encouraged Ye to take the exam in the project group. As a result, Beichin postponed dinner with Xiaohua until the evening in order to have time to take the much-needed test. The exam soon began, but Wu never showed up, which Suijie found rather strange. One of the teachers stated that apparently this student was a failing student and was simply not interested in this test. Another one refuted his guess, saying that the professor had personally invited the guy. And just a couple of minutes later, Beichin appeared at the threshold of the auditorium, apologizing for being late. The examination committee urged him to start the test quickly so as not to waste time. The extremely dissatisfied teacher told Yi to take a ticket and go get ready. However, to his surprise, he discovered that absolutely all the coupons were gone. Looking into the desk drawer, the teacher finally found the last test ticket, after which he handed it over to Baichin and once again hurried the student. At the same time, the teacher left the right to choose Wu's place in the classroom, not believing in his success. Besides, he believed that the young man had gotten his way through connections and was nothing special. After a few minutes, Yi turned to the teachers, declaring that he had finished his work. This naturally puzzled the examiners, who could not believe that Baichin had done everything. The guy put his work on the table and said that he had things to do, so he had to go. The teacher was almost certain that the student had answered the test incorrectly. Besides, if Yi is on good terms with Professor Wang, it means he relies on him completely. At this point, the second teacher asked his colleague about assignments with ancient texts, adding that he had set them aside for experts to deal with such complex scriptures in the future. The puzzled teacher replied that he had not seen any ancient texts. Taking Baichin's work in his hands, the examiner was shocked because his test turned out to be those very same ancient writings. However, his colleague continued to claim that this was impossible and that he had made a mistake since this test belonged to Wu. But the teacher was absolutely sure that these were precisely those rare ancient texts. Moreover, Yi decided everything correctly, which was simply amazing, because even doctors of science did not always manage to do this. Then, they finally realized that this student was actually a true genius. Baichin, in turn, went to dinner with Jiang, since the test did not take much time. But at that moment, a furious Bin appeared in front of him with a dagger and blocked his way. The boy instantly pointed his knife towards the young cultivator. But the main character seemed to have calculated his actions several steps ahead. As a result, he easily dodged the attack of such an enraged and revenge-hungry teenager. As soon as the young master tried to calm him down, Bin pounced on him again. Then Wu realized that it was useless to talk to this man, as jealousy had clouded his mind. After several blows, Xiaohua's suitor still did not achieve the desired result. But suddenly, Yi felt spiritual energy and realized that something was not right here. Moreover, Bin's breathing confirmed his suspicions, while Baichin continued to dodge the attacks, after which he delivered an unexpected blow which caused the guy to literally fly into the wall. But he couldn't shake the thought that this boy was clearly being manipulated by someone. Zhang in turn pretended to be dead, and naturally Wu did not believe him. Bin immediately rushed into attack, which was what Ye expected, so he was prepared for this. In this regard, the young cultivator armed himself with his old friend, the Thunderblade, after which he pierced the body of the zombified Zhang, who seemed to have lost his instinct for self-preservation. What's more amazing is that Bin didn't seem to feel the sword in his stomach and continued to rush at the guy, even biting him. Baichin immediately kicked him away and stepped back to examine the wound. At the same time, he understood that his suspicions had been confirmed and Zhang had turned into an unkillable monster. Out of Yi's sight, the unknown girl continued to command her subordinate. Using a special technique, the young man was still able to see the magical threads on Bin's body. Realizing that someone was controlling the boy, Wu began to look around. However, he failed to identify anyone suspicious, and in the meantime, Zhang was back on his feet. And after a couple of seconds, he finally found the very stranger who was controlling the crazed teenager. Bin, in turn, continued to relentlessly rush at Baichin, which was quite understandable. Having let the zombie approach him, Yi instantly pierced his body with lightning and literally burned it. Zhang's incinerated body froze in place, which enraged the unknown mercenary, because she realized that she would have to personally fight Wu since Bin had gotten out of her control. Armed with daggers, the girl headed towards the young master. However, Baichin got ahead of her and struck first to catch her off guard, which, on the whole, he succeeded in, since the mysterious stranger had difficulty holding back Yi's pressure. Not understanding where such unimaginable strength came from in the student and why she couldn't do anything. Finally giving in, the unknown mercenary declared that she would not tell him anything. Wu didn't stand on ceremony with her for long and simply cut off her head. Everything happened too quickly. However, he was never able to find out why they were hunting him, and most importantly, who was hunting him. At this time, the appraiser's patron came to see him, and the old man told him about the girl's failed task. The boss was furious, saying that they could never be trusted with anything and that they were useless. The shop worker silently absorbed all the insults and only asked for forgiveness. Saying that he didn't know how strong the kid would be, the boy suddenly hit him, after which he demanded that his grandfather give him all the information he had about this man. The old man said that he had not been able to make any inquiries about him, and that there was only a photograph. Looking at the photo, he froze, and his protege asked if they had met before. The stunned leader of the criminal organization stated that they had been hunting this boy for a long time, adding that it was he who took that very key and that in fact this student is not as simple as he seems. The boss also ordered that the location of the young man not be disclosed in order to catch him faster than the others. Xiaohua, in turn, finally waited for Baichin at the restaurant, where she ordered a variety of different dishes. However, at that moment, unknown people in tuxedos asked her to follow them. Zhang immediately turned around and saw 3 guards in front of her. The extremely indignant protagonist demanded that they release her immediately, but Hua hastened to reassure the young cultivator, stating that they were her family's bodyguards. At that moment, her father came up to her and said that they were in big trouble. The worried girl could not understand what had happened and what problems her father was talking about. Naturally, Xiaohua began to ask him about what happened, and the man sighed heavily. The young master also tried to understand what this all meant, and Jiang's face seemed familiar to him. Suddenly, the father asked his daughter if Bin had visited her recently. Of course, Hua replied that he literally came to her this morning, and her father immediately informed her of his death, adding that his family is angry with them and is putting pressure on them in business, so they will soon go bankrupt. At the same time, Jiang urged Xiao to go to them to beg for forgiveness, but the girl stated that she did not kill him. Suddenly, Wu said that it was he who killed him, and that he was the one who should go to them. A stunned Hua said that it was a bad joke and he had nothing to do with what happened. However, as always, the self-confident teenager assured that he would solve all the problems. Zhang, in turn, noted that if he went to them, they would simply kill him. But Beishan said a real man is responsible for his actions, and he clearly has no intention of dying today. With such a statement, Ye literally shocked everyone present, especially Xiao. A puzzled Jiang asked his daughter who he was, and Hua replied that he was a student from her university. Meanwhile, people and Bin's relatives were going crazy, mourning his loss because he was very young. Xiong, in turn, organized something resembling a banquet to gather hired killers to catch the person responsible for his son's death. By chance, it was at this moment that Beichen appeared at this event, where he met his acquaintances, who began to question him, believing that he was also a mercenary. The guy confirmed their assumptions, replying that he really had something to do with the mercenaries. The girls continued to ask questions about the identity of Bean's killer, but the young man was extremely reluctant to answer. And since the whole city has suffered from this family, they are even glad of the death of Xiong's son, considering it karma. Wu didn't expect to hear something like this, realizing that this clan was really preventing people from living their lives. A moment later, the head of the Zhang family appeared, surrounded by bodyguards. He immediately switched to him. He was curious about his next steps. The leader of the criminal group immediately got down to business and declared that he intended to select the best mercenaries, because he was eager to avenge the death of his heir, which was logical. Suddenly, one of those present asked if it was true that the reward was 30 million. Xiong said that if he found and killed the person responsible for Bin's death, he would receive 50 million. Naturally, such a response forced the mercenaries to act quickly, as a result of which they immediately set out to search for the killer, naively believing that luck will smile on them and they will earn huge amounts of money. However, Beichen stated that this was not necessary, since it was he who killed Bin. Everyone was shocked by this unexpected turn of events and began to whisper among themselves. An embittered Zhang immediately ordered his newly minted charges to finish off this guy. Without thinking twice, the mercenaries began to carry out their immediate work. One of them rushed forward to deal with the young master personally. However, after just a minute, he realized that this young man was not as simple as he seemed. His speed and martial arts skills were enviable. Thus, Yi dealt with one of the strongest mercenaries with absolutely no obstacles, after which 2 more thugs pounced on him, but they too were in for a surprise from the skilled Wu. Everyone was especially shocked by the fact that the teenager grabbed the killer's swords with his bare hands. Then he completely broke their blades, and then everyone finally realized who they were dealing with. Beichen himself received genuine pleasure from what was happening and fully demonstrated his superiority. The mercenaries scattered one after another, but Yi, in turn, had no intention of stopping. The leader of the assassins suddenly decided to resort to his unique skills. As a result, the building began to collapse as its heavy blows pierced the ground. People rushed to the exit in panic, realizing that it was quite dangerous to stay there. A series of explosions thundered, causing a column of dust to rise, and everyone naively believed that the guy had not survived. Zhang also rejoiced prematurely, thinking that his son had finally been avenged. The mercenary, meanwhile, slowly moved towards the fallen walls where Wu had previously been. Suddenly, the protagonist's body soared into the air, a devastating aura hovering around him. Everyone present and Xiong's guards were stunned by this unimaginable sight. The leader of the group himself began to understand that this young man was a cultivator. The young master, in turn, sparkled with spiritual energy, which filled the entire room. After which, looking at the hired killer, he said that now he couldn't escape. Beichen raised the stones into the air and sent them towards Zhang's subordinate. Huge boulders instantly flew into the guy's body, which was extremely painful. After which he fell dead to the ground. The head of the family was shocked. At the same time, rage filled him, since all his henchmen were powerless against the student. The female half simply admired such an incredible and rather attractive teenager. Having finally dealt with all the fighters, Ye went to Xiong to discuss something. Wu ordered him to stop pressuring Xiaohua and her family, as he was the one who killed his son. An enraged Jiang responded sharply that he had killed Bin and therefore had no right to demand. Then Beichen made it clear that he had better listen to the words because he could send him to his son. Naturally, Xiong couldn't help but obey the young cultivator because his strength was overwhelming. Because of this, he had to promise that he would not touch their family again and would forget about them altogether. Of course, Ye understood that Zhang would not calm down so easily and would soon gather a new army to take revenge on him. Meanwhile, Hua's father was trying to sort out the dire situation of his business. But realizing that all his enterprises had been taken over by Xiong's company, Jiang finally gave up his position. Zhao tried her best to calm her father down, saying that they would definitely get out of the current situation. However, the enraged head of the family stated that if she had married Bin, none of this would have happened. At the same time, he mentioned Yi, whom he considered a poor man. The girl tried to defend the honor of the young man. A couple of minutes later, his phone rang, and Secretary He announced the incredible news that the Jiang family had lifted all sanctions, adding that they can now run their business again because Beichen has settled the matter with Xiong. Zhang was shocked by what happened and could not believe that a student had influenced Zhang's decision. Extremely worried, Xiaohua asked her father what happened and who called him. Zhang suddenly broke into a smile and declared that her friend had indeed sorted out their problems. In this regard, he urged his daughter to immediately invite their savior to visit to show her gratitude. Meanwhile, Wu himself was walking down the street and thinking about the Jiang family, which turned out to not be so strong and influential. At that moment, Hua called him and began to thank him for his help. She also invited the guy to dinner since her father wanted to see him. The teenager immediately caught a taxi and went to the designated meeting place. Thus, the young master went to the Fuyuan estate, where the Jiang family was waiting for him. Initially, Yi did not pay attention to the taxi driver's strange behavior and stared out the window. However, after some time, the driver picked up tremendous speed and Beichen reprimanded him, but he didn't listen to the young man and continued to pick up the pace, which Wu didn't like. At a certain point, the taxi driver rushed into the wall and jumped out of the car. The stunned teenager did not expect such a turn of events and did not have time to react. As a result, the car crashed into the fence and an explosion occurred. Alun naively believed that the cultivator was finished and now all that was left was to do something small. This was stated by his patron, who arrived at the scene of the accident and praised his protege for the work he had done. The boss ordered him to bring the crippled boy to him to interrogate him and find out the location of the key. Lun immediately headed towards the burning car in order to find Beichen. But to everyone's surprise, the situation took a completely different turn, because Yi turned out to be not only alive but also completely unharmed, which shocked everyone. A frightened Along immediately backed away, realizing that this would not lead to anything good. However, Wu still caught up with him. The guy literally flew out of the cloud of smoke and pounced on him. At this point, Beichen began to beat the self-confident criminal with particular cruelty. By delivering his crushing series of blows, the teenager dealt with him in a split second, after which Wu went to his patron, who also did not expect such strength from Ye. And Lun, in turn, found himself at the feet of the boss and the old man, which made them think, since even the explosion didn't touch the young cultivator, which was surprising to say the least. The main character naturally recognized the antique shop worker and approached him, saying that he intended to kill him, intending to get the jewels for free. At this point, the boss called on the young master to calm down and return the key, but Ye did not know what was being discussed. This made him think, since he had not had any memory loss recently. Suddenly, the guy took out a sword and pointed it towards Beichen, again demanding some kind of key. Wu stated that he had no idea what he was talking about and that he should stop making his senseless threats. Of course, the attacker did not listen to Yi, just like his predecessors, who ultimately ended badly. The boss immediately swung his blade, but Beichen managed to generate a protective barrier. The stunned leader of a criminal gang discovered that a magical shield had literally worn down his sword, after which the young man pounced on him and began to inflict furious blows, which were extremely painful. The boss simply didn't have a single chance to resist and flew to the side. The old man was shocked by the boy's unimaginable power, realizing that his leader could not cope with him. After dealing with him, Wu asked the shop worker what key he was talking about, and the grandfather stated that it was Yukiju's secret information. Therefore, they did not tell him about this. Naturally, Bacon did not believe him and took the necessary measures. As a result, Yi killed the old man, thereby removing a couple more people from his enemy list. But most importantly, Wu wanted to understand what kind of key they were looking for and why there was so much fuss about it. In connection with this, the guy sent a spiritual message to Jin, which was instantly sent to him by the wind. After some time, Dayu finally received a notification from the teenager, where it was necessary to find all the necessary information about Yukiju and report to him. Meanwhile, the Zhang family couldn't wait for the invited guest to appear. And just when they were wondering where he was, Yi showed up and greeted them. Xiaohua's joyful father reciprocated and rushed to shake the young man's hand. At the same time, Jiang began to thank Beichen for his help in business, which was what Wu expected. Soon they headed inside the luxurious house, where a royal feast was prepared. The man continued to say that if it weren't for the boy, they would have had big problems. Pouring a glass of wine, Jiang invited Ye to drink to his health and remarked that everything would be fine now. Wu kept him company and told him that he had killed Bin, so he had to resolve the incident. After which the teenager threw back the glass of wine in one gulp and drank it to the bottom. However, seeing that Xiaohua had not drunk, her father encouraged her to support the company. Suddenly, Jiang's assistant approached him and quietly said that Hua always gets drunk from one glass. But the head of the family assured that this is exactly what he is trying to achieve, to bring the matter to an end, adding that Beichen is an excellent choice for the role of a future son-in-law. After a few minutes, Wu and Xiao were completely drunk but continued drinking. Then a pleased Jiang ordered the butler to send the sweet couple off to rest. The ward suddenly asked where exactly he should take them, which surprised Father Xiao. Having ordered them to be taken to his daughter's room, the guy immediately called the servants to take the young couple to rest. Finally, Beichen and Hua found themselves in bed and slept soundly, which was exactly what Jiang had wanted. But at the same time, the maid called Wu her son-in-law, and while half asleep, the young man tried to object to her. However, he instantly fell into a deep sleep. Xiao unexpectedly moved closer to him, but she felt that she was not very comfortable and began to fidget, which did not please Yi, who immediately hugged her and called her to sleep. Thus they spent the night together. The next morning, the young lady opened her eyes and saw Beichen in front of her, which made her furious. Hua screamed, waking up Wu, who immediately jumped out of bed. Looking around, the bewildered teenager asked what had happened. Instead of a clear answer, he received a blow to the head from an extremely displeased Xiao, which he never expected. The stunned young cultivator asked how he had ended up in her room, but the girl was worried about a completely different question which she hastened to ask him. Naturally, the main character assured her that nothing terrible had happened. However, there was one nuance. The young master was without pants, which of course could not help but be embarrassing. Beichen immediately pulled up his pants and declared that this was some kind of misunderstanding, after which Ye hurried to leave Hua's room so as not to create even more trouble. Wu walked out the door, where Jiang and his butler were watching him, naively believing that they had managed to bring them closer. The whole time the guy was thinking about only one thing, but since he had overdone it with alcohol, he didn't remember anything. Beichen's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Dayu, who turned to his mentor. Jin hastened to report that he had managed to obtain the information that Ye was interested in. Wu urged the old man not to delay and to quickly tell him what exactly he had been fortunate enough to discover. Dayu told him a story about how someone had discovered the same magical bricks as in the dungeon. Naturally, the teenager called on Jin to take him there so that he could personally inspect the place. After heading to the Longxing Corporation, the elder stated that it was here that his people had found the ruins of the treasure tower. Beichen was eager to investigate the location, but things weren't that simple, because they were faced with a problem in the form of a glass door that was closed. Dayu stated that they needed a pass card to open it. At that moment, a man came up and opened the door. A stunned Wu watched the sliding door system in amazement, noticing that the magical barriers in this world look quite unusual. Finally making it inside the organization, Jin urged Ye to follow him carefully and quietly. They soon came across a room with cultivators who had begun to meditate. In the middle of the room, there was a sphere emitting streams of spiritual energy. Dayu and Beichen carefully looked around the corner, and the old man said that this is where they found those very bricks. Wu guessed that they might have found the treasure tower and deliberately hid it with this structure. Suddenly, one of the strangers felt a strange presence and asked who was there. Jin, in turn, became nervous, but the self-confident Ye said that they had nothing to fear. As a result, the guy went into the room, and he called on Dayu to follow him. Initially, the young man intended to simply talk to the unknown cultivators. Beichen got straight to the point, asking where the treasure tower was. The guys looked at each other, not understanding how he knew about her existence. One of them suddenly armed himself with a sword that was on the stand. At the same time, Juan stated that he had recently learned a new technique and would like to try it. Moreover, the person who knows about the tower must not take the secret outside this room. His friends began to encourage their friend, saying that he was capable of dealing with the stranger himself. Then Yi proposed the following: if he wins the duel, they will tell about the tower. The young people just laughed at this. They had clearly underestimated Wu, which was their fatal mistake. But Huang suddenly agreed, naively believing that he could easily deal with him, after which he immediately pounced on Beichen, not even suspecting what awaited him. Yi dodged his furious attacks without any problem, surprising his friends. Then Wu counterattacked. Everything happened too quickly, and the guy flew to the side. Thus, They finally realized that there was a fellow cultivator in front of him, but the angry Huan was not about to give up and resorted to his arsenal of skills. A moment later, the teenager summoned a magical tiger, which pounced on Beichin. Naturally, as always, Yi was ready for such tricks and rushed forward. Armed with a thunderblade, Wu bravely charged forward, which also surprised the masters, because with just one move, the young man was able to neutralize Huan's technique. The huge spiritual tiger literally fell apart. Everyone froze in place, realizing that this man was beyond their strength. After all, it took their friend several months to study this ability. Beichin, in turn, smiled and said that his level of strength was too weak. At the same time, he pointed his powerful sword at the frightened A Huang. The unknown cultivator himself felt the incredible aura of the protagonist with his whole body. It seemed that the young master had convinced everyone present that it was better not to mess with him, after which he urged them to finally tell about the treasure tower. Huan agreed. However, at the last moment, he suddenly pounced on him and grabbed Beichin. A puzzled Wu asked him if he really thought this was the best solution. Meanwhile, Huan encouraged his friends to attack the teenager, which was an unforgivable mistake. Naturally, the partners rushed towards Yi, having first armed themselves with swords. A moment later, they plunged their blades into Beichin's neck, thinking that he was finished. Huan said, with a smile on his face, that he was not as strong as they had thought at first. His friends joined in his jubilation, declaring that they were the heroes of Longxing, and it was better not to mess with them. However, after a couple of seconds, Wu's body literally began to smoke, and they couldn't understand what was happening. As a result, Yi completely disappeared into thin air, and the guys immediately began to look around. A moment later, the young master appeared behind them and said that they should have listened to him. But now they must run, because death is already coming for them. At that moment, Beichin attacked them with a sword. One of them tried to defend himself with a magical barrier, but it couldn't withstand it and fell apart. Then they finally saw the true power of the young cultivator, who was undoubtedly superior to them in strength. The end result was an explosion, and the building partially began to collapse. Shocked, A Huang couldn't understand where such unimaginable energy came from. Wu, in turn, never stopped demonstrating his unique abilities. Subsequently, two of them were subjected to powerful electric shocks and died on the spot. Their lifeless bodies instantly collapsed to the ground, and Huan stepped back in horror. Naturally, he tried to escape, but he was not given the opportunity, because Jin blocked his way and said that it was better to tell the truth about the treasure tower. The self-confident Beichin slowly moved towards the frightened boy. Then he dealt a crushing blow to finally force the cultivator to speak. Huan immediately began to ask for forgiveness and begged not to kill him, adding that he had made a mistake, and he had to fulfill his promise. He literally burst into tears like a child. Then Ye once again ordered him to tell him the location of the Tower of 1,000 Treasures. The guy immediately told me that many years ago, the chairman of the Longxing company turned to a feng shui master for help. Thus, they came to the conclusion that this is the place to build this structure. But the workers suddenly discovered a bronze door. Naturally, they decided to explore the interior of the dungeon. Where the unknown altar with the precious ball ended up, no one knew what it was. But later it turned out that the sphere emitted spiritual energy and awakened the veins of those who entered, thereby improving their cultivation. The master also discovered an engraving that said it was a tower of 1,000 treasures. Beichin suddenly interrupted his story and demanded to see this unique place with the altar. But at that very moment, Huan felt his heart skip a beat, and Ye couldn't understand what had happened. After all, he wasn't doing anything, especially since there was no one else in the room except them, and all of this seemed strange to him. Suddenly, the guy started coughing up blood, and Wu was puzzled by the stranger's condition. He then assumed that someone was watching them and provoked such a phenomenon so that they would not find out the truth. Beichin decided to take the magic ball with him to examine it further. In addition, it was necessary to find out who exactly was behind this and where the treasure tower was located. After which, they and Old Man Jin hurried to leave this location. Meanwhile, the leader of the sinister group called Xiao Hiduim, who was one of the best hired killers of the organization, and only she could be trusted with a dangerous task. The girl immediately ran to her mentor, asking what had happened this time. The head of the sect ordered her to kill one person. He asked in surprise who exactly needed to be eliminated. Beichin's face appeared in the fog that appeared, so that Xiao would understand who she was hunting. A moment later, she jumped out the window, heading for the head of the notorious Yi. The next day, the main character went to university as always. However, the young cultivator was constantly thinking about the connecting groups, which were mainly three sects, Banshan and Yukiju with Longxing. Besides this, the young master still didn't know what key the leader of the Yukiju faction was asking him about. At this moment, Wu entered the classroom and sat down next to Ting, continuing to think about his problems. Suddenly, the teacher announced that he had great news for the students, adding that a new student would be transferring to their group today. The guys were in anticipation. A moment later, a girl named Sun entered the classroom, and the teacher quickly introduced her to everyone. The girl greeted her new classmates and glanced at the boys to find her target. Of course, most of the guys wondered if she had a boyfriend. The teacher in turn called Xiao to sit behind Beichin. He kindly agreed and headed to her seat. Sitting behind her potential victim, she began to think about how best to get closer to him, in order not to arouse anyone's suspicions in the future and finally deal with Yi. At the end of the lesson, Wu walked out in a completely calm and relaxed manner. But just at that moment, a joyful Sun ran up to him and grabbed his hand. The girl asked the young man if he would like to join her during her lunch break. Naturally, his classmates became jealous of him because they liked her. Beichin himself showed no particular desire to dine with the new girl and resisted in every possible way. However, the persistent he still dragged him into the dining room, declaring that she intended to treat Wu. Of course, this seemed strange to him, so Yi asked why she treated him so well. Xiao admitted that she liked him, then suddenly asked him to bring her some pepper. Sun then slipped poison into his food, believing that Beichin would not know anything. A couple of seconds later, the guy brought her the promised pepper, and the girl thanked him. And soon they began to eat, as the teenager was very hungry. Seeing Ye eating noodles, he thought that her plan had succeeded and was now definitely over. She caught herself thinking that her job had never been this easy before. However, Wu managed to eat the entire portion, and the poison still had no effect. Xiao couldn't understand what was going on. Meanwhile, Jiwen approached them and said that he was looking for his friend. He added that there would be a meeting that evening and Yi was obliged to attend it, since he had moved out from them a long time ago, and in connection with this, they decided to throw a party. Naturally, Beichin agreed and followed Zhang, away from the strange girl. A stunned Sun shouted at him, but the teenager pretended not to hear her. At the same time, he became curious about what she had in mind, because in fact, he felt poison. But with the help of a huge amount of spiritual energy, he managed to neutralize the toxins. Therefore, Wu decided to wait for her next move so that he could deal with her when the opportunity presented itself. Xiao tried to understand why her poison didn't work and why the guy was still alive. Soon, Jiwen brought his friend, where the table was set and everyone had been waiting for Beichin for a long time. And since Zhang felt guilty towards Ye, of course, he wanted to return the favor as soon as possible. As soon as the fat man introduced his friend to the rest of the guys, they immediately declared that they had heard about him. Wu sat down calmly at the table, and they began a casual conversation over the meal. But a couple of minutes later, an unknown and extremely brazen thug burst into the restaurant. Everyone immediately tensed up, realizing that anything could be expected from such a person. He was followed by several more strangers who said they had booked the entire restaurant. In connection with this, they demanded that absolutely all visitors leave the establishment. One of the guys refused to do this, replying that they were the first to come here and book a table. Of course, the big guy didn't listen to him and rushed towards Beichin's classmates. He ended up hitting one of them, thus signing his own death warrant. A classmate tried to respond in kind and started waving his fists. But he never managed to achieve what he wanted, as the guy turned out to be stronger and more agile than him. Thus, the teenager simply could not do anything and only absorbed the blows. The young cultivator watched what was happening, realizing that it would be impossible to do without his participation. Meanwhile, Jiwen tried to help his friend and calm him down. The brute, in turn, called on his henchmen to deal with the rest. And at that moment, the main character declared that they had started a fight in vain and would soon regret it. Naturally, the hooligans' reaction was immediate, and they headed towards the young man. A frightened Zhang asked the young master not to get involved with them, but Ye did not listen to him. He said that they were obliged to compensate for the damage, and only then would they leave the establishment, which only made the bandits laugh. Hu moved from words to deeds and rushed towards Beichin, intending to put him in his place. Of course, this is exactly what Wu wanted, to teach the upstarts a lesson and once again demonstrate his skills. At first, he seemed to be toying with them, simply dodging the blows as if trying to understand who he was dealing with. Then, grabbing one of the thugs by the arm, Yi said that they were too slow, after which Beichin threw him aside like a rag, noting that they knew absolutely nothing about fighting. The same fate befell the next two thugs, which made them think. A moment later, Wu literally broke through the wall with one of them, and then they finally realized that the kid wasn't so simple, and their leader even tried to escape. Naturally, Yi couldn't allow him to do that. The teenager's classmates could not believe that Beichin was so strong and proficient in martial arts. Wu himself once again called on the big guy to compensate for the damage in monetary terms, but Ajing refused to do this. Moreover, he said that his boss from the Banshan sect would arrive now. He immediately called Jin and asked him to come to the restaurant to deal with the boy. However, he did not take into account one important detail. This would become his public disgrace. And after a certain time, an angry Dayu burst into the establishment and headed towards Sin. Verzila immediately told about a certain person who was causing chaos and needed to be taught a lesson. He then pointed his finger at Baichin and declared that it was this boy who had caused him trouble. Jin was shocked when he saw his young mentor and seemed speechless. Wu, in turn, with a smile on his face, asked if he really had any feeble-minded people under his command. Dayu immediately fell to his knees before him and began to ask forgiveness for his failures. And Sin was stunned by such an unexpected turn of events and did not know how to get out of this situation. Jiwon, like his classmates, was also perplexed, realizing how cool Ye was. At that moment, the enraged old man ordered his ward to come to him. Sin took a timid step towards his patron and asked what was going on. With a lightning-fast movement, Dayu broke his arm and said that he had insulted the owner and must pay for it. The guy experienced extremely painful feelings. His body immediately began to shake. An angry Jin ordered them to leave the restaurant immediately and never come back. Thus, the crippled Banshan fighters rushed towards the exit, not understanding how a youth could be Dai's master. Wu, in turn, praised the old man, saying that he had done the right thing. He stated that there was news about the Yukiju organization, but nothing had been heard about the tower. Then Jin told the story of Ye, who was being pursued by the sect in order to obtain the key. After which Dayu asked the mentor if he knew this man Wu. Baichin replied that he had an acquaintance with a similar name, but the young man himself became thoughtful. Having thanked the old man for his help, the teenager sent him off to rest and went to his classmates. Of course, Jiwon immediately began asking him about the Banshan sect, but the guy made every effort to deny it and change the subject. Raising his glass, he called for a good drink and a good rest, in which of course everyone supported him. Overall, they had a good time and talked about distracting topics while relying on alcohol. After several hours, the guys had had enough alcohol and decided it was best to go home. Bacon, in turn, went for a walk in the fresh air, as the alcohol was taking its toll. At the same time, he literally saw double, so this was the best option. Meanwhile, the restless son took action and, armed with a knife, rushed towards Ye. Suddenly, the protagonist stopped, thus Xiao missed. The young cultivator didn't expect to see he and asked what she was doing here. The girl instantly broke into a smile, having first hidden the knife behind her back. Naturally, the young master understood that she had a reason for being there, and he continued to talk her down. But Sun suspected something was wrong, believing that he was deliberately pretending to be drunk. Then Xiao used her trick again, saying that she really liked him. Baichin played along with her, but at the same time made it clear that he was not particularly interested in her. In this regard, he asked if she was absolutely sure that he liked her. He immediately took a pose, trying to lure the teenager into her arms, but she failed. Moreover, Wu began to hint that she had a masculine body, and that he was not interested in such things. The stunned girl replaced her smile with anger and asked why he was insulting her. Thus, Ye exposed her, and Sun immediately pulled out her knife, after which she attacked Bacon, but the young man easily dodged the attack. Wu noted with a smile that she was completely incapable of handling bladed weapons. Xiao was shocked by the guy's incredible speed and agility. Bachin also began to demonstrate his abilities in order to dot all the I's. As a result, he launched a series of punches that he was able to withstand with great difficulty. She was clearly not prepared for such a rebuff, which Wu took full advantage of, which once again dealt a crushing blow. This time, the girl did not have time to react. Sun subsequently crashed into a wall in an extremely painful manner and severely injured her back. Suddenly, Xiao asked her opponent when he exposed her. Ye asked her in return who she was and why she was pursuing him, because from the moment she mixed poison into his food, this thought never left him. He was surprised that he knew about her ill intentions all along, but carefully hid it. Then Sun asked him what he had in mind and what he really wanted. Bachin asked who sent her to kill him, but the stubborn woman refused to answer, stating that she wouldn't tell him anything, and he shouldn't even try to get a confession out of her. Wu immediately began to tear her clothes, saying that otherwise she would have an unforgettable night. To my surprise, it worked, and the tearful girl said that she would confess to everything. Sun eventually revealed that she had a mentor named Ming Jiang, who was the secret owner of the Longxing Corporation. But that was not all, as he was one of the elders of the Yujiju organization. Finally, Yi got the full picture and understood what was happening and who was hunting him, and most importantly, why. Wu subsequently released He and urged her to convey a message to her master to come to the abandoned building behind the school tomorrow. Surprised, Sun asked Bachin what he had planned this time, and he smiled. Then he replied that it was time to finish with Longxing and Yujiju, and the stunned Xiao did not approve of his intentions. Suddenly, the teenager disappeared without a trace. The mercenary was shocked by what was happening. All this time on the way to Jiang, she thought about only one thing: how to tell him everything. Finally collecting her thoughts, a distressed Sun came to her mentor. A worried Meng immediately asked if she had completed such an important task. Looking down guiltily, he quietly said that she couldn't do it, which only infuriated him. She said, There is something very important, the impatient elder urged her not to delay it. Then she conveyed a message from Bachin that literally shocked him. A puzzled Jiang jumped up from his seat and couldn't understand who this boy thought he was, because challenging two organizations alone was at least reckless. In connection with this, Man decided to play it safe and hurried to call his old friend, who told him that in fact it was this man who stole the key. Jiang didn't expect to hear something like this, and it warmed his soul. He naively believed that he would soon finish off this child. He subsequently ordered everyone to be on full alert to go and get the key the next day. Meanwhile, the protagonist began cultivating in order to prepare for the final battle. Therefore, he absorbed various techniques that could be useful to him in battle. The Heavenly Thunderblade Treatise was no exception, and the young master learned this skill. Having thus perfected his sword, everything around sparkled with lightning. Even outside the young cultivator's room, thunderstorms appeared in the night sky. Mingjiang was shocked by what he saw, wondering who was training. The answer was obvious. The sect leader began to understand that this man was extremely strong. The next day, everyone went to the battle site, where it had been agreed upon in advance. Several masters from the Yujiju faction arrived on the roof of the building and began to look around. After a certain time, Jiang arrived with his servant's son. One of the elders said that if they really managed to defeat this guy, it would be a new beginning for their clan. Meng, in turn, insisted that if he took on this case, it meant the teenager would die. Then the guild leader urged him to go down and end this once and for all. Xiao and Jiang immediately jumped off the roof, intending to wait for the overconfident Ye. They were all absolutely certain that Meng would deal with the boy. However, they decided to play it safe, and the master ordered his charges to set traps. After a few minutes, everything was done, and all that was left was to wait for Bachin. But he was still missing, and the members of the Yujiju organization began to believe that the boy had simply deceived them. At that moment, another foreman ran up to the chief and announced that the last trap had been set. But everyone was puzzled by the fact that Wu was absent and had still not appeared on the battlefield. Thinking that the guy was just pulling the wool over their eyes, they thought about leaving. Zhang, in turn, was furious at the teenager's antics. He continued to assure that she had not deceived him. However, after a couple of minutes, Bachin finally showed up and said that they should have prepared well. Much to the surprise of everyone present, Meng and Sun immediately turned around. The leader of the sect was also surprised, saying that it was amazing because the boy was not afraid of death. Zhang immediately said that he admired Ye's courage and that if the young man gave him the key, he would spare him. But the self-confident Wu replied that he had challenged them to a fight, so they would be the ones begging for mercy. He added that he didn't have any key, which only infuriated the members of the organization. Meng instantly armed himself with a huge blade, saying that now he was in trouble, after which he immediately released a furious attack. But Bachin was prepared for something like this. The young master easily caught the magic sphere that Jiang released. Everyone was shocked as Wu stopped such a powerful blow with his bare hands. The clan leader also did not expect that the kid would be so strong. Meanwhile, Bachin brought down the magic sphere, surprising everyone even more. He then directed the fragments towards Jiang, who began to deflect them with his sword. However, Sun had nothing to defend herself with, and as a result, Wu's attack struck her down, and she fell to the ground unconscious. Jiang was shocked by what was happening, and Ye in turn urged him to call the others. Since he couldn't handle him alone, Bacon took advantage of the moment and struck him in the back, but Meng still managed to react and blocked the cultivator's efforts. However, this was not enough as Wu unleashed a series of attacks on him. Eventually, Ye's crushing blows knocked the tireless Meng down. The elder instantly flew to the side, as he simply had no opportunity to resist. The extremely painful landing also made the situation worse, and Jiang was thus defeated, not understanding how this is possible and where such a young boy gets so much strength from. At this time, Xiao came to her senses and rushed to her mentor, not believing that he had died. The protagonist noted that, being so weak, he should not have accepted the challenge. The elders of the organization also couldn't believe that a young cultivator had killed Meng. One of them said that they had clearly underestimated the boy, and besides, he had carefully hidden his power. In connection with this, they decided to use their traps to finally deal with Yi. The young master himself approached Sun and called for the rest of the Yujiju representatives to be called. Suddenly, Bachin felt a rather strange aura around him and looked around. At that moment, he literally began to fall into the ground, which turned into quicksand. As a result, Wu fell down into some kind of dungeon, realizing that this was clearly the work of Yujiju. But now he was thinking about only one thing: how to get out of the unknown cave, which turned out to be a kind of purgatory, sealing the soul, as the leader of the sect said. Meanwhile, Bacon wandered in the abyss, realizing that it was a magical seal. And since the Yujiju were simply afraid of him, they decided to get rid of him in this way. Suddenly, sand monsters appeared behind the guy, trying to attack him. Wu, in turn, felt something was wrong, so he turned around sharply and saw a monster in front of him, from which he immediately began to run away. But it was difficult to do so, because the sands pulled him back. And subsequently, Baichin found himself at the epicenter of events, where he was surrounded by demons. But Yi found a way out of any situation, and this dungeon was no exception. Having escaped the sand stream of monsters, the teenager began to attack them. With just one move, Wu was able to defeat the desert dwellers. But their battle did not end there. And even the severed heads of the monsters did not kill them because they regenerated. Baichin looked around again, realizing that he needed to find a way out of the seal. By that time, the sand demons had recovered and rushed towards Yi again. Then Wu began to think, trying to figure out how to get rid of the monsters. Having come to the conclusion that he should cut them down along with the space, the young man rushed into the attack. At the same time, he did not hesitate to use his new abilities, and in a moment dealt with a mountain of sand. The effect was not long in coming, and the demons instantly scattered into tiny grains of sand. Baichin himself did not expect that this technique would be so effective. At the same time, a thunder beam pierced the seal and rushed into the sky. Yujiju was shocked, understanding that the teenager has incredible skills in his arsenal, which he demonstrates. Thus, the spatial field was finally destroyed, which no one expected. The stream of spiritual energy continued to pierce the heavens as Wu was finally released. The organization's elder couldn't believe what was happening, thinking that Yi was some kind of alien. But the fact remained that Baichin had escaped from the press and was extremely determined. Sun also tried to understand who he was and how he had achieved such an incredible level of martial arts. His aura was literally squeezing everything inside. Wu at this time began to look for representatives of Yujiju, who were nearby on the roof of the house and were thinking about how to resist Yi. The leader of the criminal group noted that Baichin had found them and they should hurry. His henchmen urged him to fight the boy, since there were 3 of them and he was alone. However, the boss believed that this man was clearly not to be underestimated, especially since they did not know what other tricks he had in his arsenal. And just as the clan leader ordered everyone to retreat to think about how to defeat Wu, the guy suddenly appeared in their path and asked where they were going. Then they realized that they could not escape and would have to fight such a strong opponent. The protagonist slowly moved towards them, saying that they had been hunting him all this time and now wanted to escape. The guild leader noted that they were not afraid of him, and he clearly did not understand the trouble he was bringing upon himself. Since the Yujiju sect is extremely powerful, the wards immediately declared that it was time to send the boy to his master so that he could make a puppet out of him. The young cultivator was surprised to hear about another mentor and asked who he was. Naturally, they ignored Baichin's question and immediately rushed to attack. One of them began to use his magical skills, thereby forming a kind of sphere. But the overconfident Wu easily withstood his blow, declaring that this power was not enough. At that moment, the second master attacked him. But this was not a problem for Ye, because his lightning speed allowed him to react to what was happening quite quickly. Thus, Baichin jumped to the side and prepared for the next attack. By plunging the thunder blade into the ground, Wu caused a furious thunderstorm to appear. A few seconds later, they transformed into a dragon, which rushed towards the enemies. With just one move, he literally incinerated 2 of Yujiju's fighters, and the sect leader was shocked. Yi himself hastened to finish off the last brave man. Surprisingly, he did not retreat and gave battle. He menacingly declared that he was not afraid of him, and that soon the boy would learn the true power of Yujiju. As a result, the master generated a magical shield in an attempt to hold back Wu's onslaught. But suddenly the barrier turned into arrows that rushed towards Baichin. The teenager immediately began to fight back with the Thunderblade, which was generally successful. At the same time, Yi noted with a smile on his face that he was much stronger than his subordinates, which would only make the battle more interesting. A second later, the young man disappeared from the sight of the elder, who began to look around. However, the cultivator was nowhere to be found, which only alerted the leader of the Yujiju sect. Suddenly, Wu appeared behind him and delivered a crushing and lightning-fast sword strike. As a result, he cut off his hand. The stunned master immediately stepped back. Realizing that the battle was nearing its end, the confident teenager slowly moved toward the wounded fighter. He was bleeding and saying that his guild would never forgive him for this. Then he suddenly took out an unknown pill from his pocket with a shaking hand. He stated that he originally didn't want to use the Chenkun pill, but now he had no other choice. Having finally swallowed it, the master of the criminal organization immediately felt a surge of strength. Yu immediately noticed the change in breathing. At that moment, the warrior Yujiju was enveloped in an unknown aura, after which he summoned multiple whirlwinds of incredible power. Suddenly, they began to suck Baichin inside, but he could not move. Wu realized that this man was not so simple and he needed to get out of another trap. However, this was quite difficult to do, which is what Yujiju's representative tried to take advantage of. Speaking of which, Yi is not actually that strong and he should have used the pill in the first place. But Bacon still managed to free himself from the hurricane, which his opponent did not expect. The smile instantly turned to anger, so he again had to look for a way to defeat the boy, who did not give him such an opportunity and immediately unleashed a series of furious blows. The wounded master inevitably flew into the wall and collapsed to the ground. It seemed everything was over. Wu carefully approached the elder's bloody body, believing that he was dead. Thus, Bacon once again defeated the city's most evil faction. After which the guy went in search of the treasure tower, but before that it was necessary to find the necessary information about it. As soon as the teenager went downstairs, he heard Sun Xiaohe's sharp cry, who instantly ran away from him, calling people for help. He understood that she was very scared. However, he didn't care about her at all, since he was interested in something completely different. Approaching Jiang's body, Wu decided to test his memory to find out the location of the tower. Touching his head, Bachin began to wander through his memories, where Yi saw a certain bloody pool with an unknown person inside. The young man assumed that this was the very owner that Yu Jiju's henchman had spoken of. He declared that he would get the guy at any cost and kill him, which Wu strongly doubted. The next day, the main character went to university as always. He first called Jin and asked him to come to the entrance of the school. At the same time, Ye understood perfectly well that Meng's memories did not help him, which meant that he would have to look for the tower himself. After a certain amount of time, the elder arrived at the designated place and called out to Wu. Approaching his mentor, Dai asked why he had called him. The young master gave him the mask and the pass card, saying that he would need it. The puzzled old man asked why he needed this, and the young cultivator smiled. He then said that he would have to pretend to be Jiang in order to infiltrate Longxing Company, where he will need to find information about the treasure tower, in which these items will help. Jin immediately rushed to complete the task, while Bachin himself decided to rest. Returning from school, the teenager was surprised because Tin unexpectedly prepared a luxurious dinner, which came as a real surprise to him, as he certainly didn't expect such care from his neighbor. The girl immediately invited him to the table, and naturally he agreed to have a snack. Seeing the abundance of different dishes, Yi did not stand on ceremony and began to eat. It's worth noting that Wu's appetite was perfectly fine, and Ting urged him not to rush. But the young man literally choked on the food, as it turned out to be quite tasty. At that moment, Xiaohua suddenly opened the front door and called out to the guy. A stunned Beichin asked what she was doing there and why she had come at all. The angry girl said that he ran out of her room to go to another. In this regard, the enraged Jiang dragged the teenager along with her, saying that they urgently needed to talk. A puzzled Wu replied that he hadn't finished eating, but Huang ignored this fact. Only Tin couldn't understand what was going on. She caught herself thinking that she was starting to feel jealous of him. Meanwhile, Xiao brought Beichin to an unknown building and said that she needed to find medicine to cleanse the meridians. Naturally, Yi was supposed to act as an assistant, but in reality, it was just an excuse to hang out with him. Then the young man decided to combine business with pleasure and look for some useful herbs for himself. In addition, there could be many different plants of interest to him at the fair. However, he did not notice anything special but continued his search. A moment later, he felt an inexplicable sense of unease and looked around, after which an incredible smell reached out to him. Beichin immediately rushed forward, where he saw a rather curious tulip among the ingredients and approached it closer. A puzzled Jiang asked what was happening to him and why he was acting so strangely. Suddenly, the entire room was filled with a bright red glow, and an explosion thundered, after which the main character found himself in a dark place, similar to some kind of dungeon. The young master began to look around and suddenly saw a strange picture. The mysterious master of the Yujiju clan was lying on the surface of a bloody pool with a tulip on top of him. The young cultivator couldn't understand what was happening to him and whether it was a dream. At that moment, the flower sparkled with an unimaginable aura and began to rise above the body of the unknown person, who a moment later came to his senses and screamed sharply. Beichin began to retreat back. Suddenly, the tulip rushed towards him. Everything happened too quickly. The guy simply didn't have time to react, and the flower literally pierced his body. As Ye screamed in fear, the extremely worried Xiaohua immediately hugged him and asked what happened. Beichin replied that everything was fine, but the teenager himself tried to understand what this could be connected with. He believed that this was the memory space left behind by that suspicious tulip. Then Wu came to the conclusion that the death flower could resurrect the dead. Suddenly, the seller asked him if he wanted to buy it. People crowded around Yi, saying that whoever bought this tulip would die prematurely. The shopkeeper smiled and said that if the young man was not afraid of death, he could sell him for $1 million. Beichin reciprocated and agreed, after first handing over his bank card.